You're listening to The Grip, where we take hold of mindset and martial arts. Now, let's get started. Today on The Grip, we're joined by someone whose life and journey are as diverse as they are inspiring. With a martial arts background that spans from BJJ, judo, wrestling, sambo, kickboxing, muay do, and kenpo, he's a well-rounded martial artist and a second-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. Beyond the mats, he's a proud Christian, husband, and father, and has made a significant impact serving on high-level protection teams within the States and internationally. His professional path included time as a police officer in Bullhead City, Arizona, where he worked as a narcotics detective and served on the SWAT team. Today, he continues his mission of service and leadership as the owner of Journeyman Grappling in Ording, Washington, building community, mentoring students, and sharing his passion for martial arts and life. And on a personal note, he was also a major influence in my own jiu-jitsu journey during my time in Seattle, and I'm truly excited to welcome him to the show. Please join me in welcoming Roland Gutierrez. Roland, this is, going to be all about you, and just kind of the wisdom and, your experiences throughout your life. And so I really want to take it back before we dive into all the great things that are going on now and today. So I want to start off by just talking about what life was like for you growing up.
Growing up, it was different. I had a really good childhood. I can't lie. I'm one of four boys. I'm the third out of four. My two older brothers are my half brothers. My mom and my dad both had sons. They got divorced in their first marriage, got together, and then had myself and my little brothers. Having four brothers to fight for food with, was a good preparation for my careers in the future. That was good. And then we grew up in Southern California, all over Orange County. We had the opportunity to be at times, pretty well off, and at times to be really poor. So it worked out really good. But we never really knew the difference. We had hard times in the family and didn't notice. My parents were awesome. My mom and dad were awesome. My older brothers were awesome. My little brother's awesome. So it was really nice to have that dynamic. And then it was a good time to grow up in Orange County. I mean, it was a really good time to be in Southern California. I mean, in the 80s and 90s was, in my opinion, it was the best time to be in California. I wouldn't go back right now, but yeah, it was a really good childhood. We did a ton of stuff. I grew up kind of a suburban kid. Southern California is like endless suburbia. So we didn't grow up doing outdoor stuff. We were all athletes. So it was changing from football pads to wrestling singlets, going from one practice to the next. And we played every sport we possibly could. So it was pretty awesome. And my dad was kind of take his vacation 1 hour at a time. So that way he could leave work early to go take two boys to this practice. So it was a good life. My family's always been awesome. I spent a lot of time with extended family on both sides. My aunts, my uncles were awesome. So I have no complaints there. It was a good time.
That's great. What did your parents do for work?
My dad was a major subcontract negotiator for Boeing. So he was in aerospace his whole life. And he started in the mailroom and ended up, running a whole team of negotiators. So it was pretty cool.
And then your mom?
My mom had an interesting career. She was a stay-at-home mom for a little while, but most of the time she actually pioneered the medical transcribing industry. She worked in hospitals her whole life, so she grew up in hospitals. And, my grandmother was like a hospital administrator. So and my aunt too. So they were all kind of involved in hospital stuff. My mom fell right into it. Transcribing wasn't really a huge industry that was tapped in the 70s and 80s. And then it was kind of wild. She ended up at one point selling her company that in 20 years later ended up working for that company for a short period of time. She was like,
wow,
amazing. Yeah. So she did that, and then things settled out, and she would stay at home pretty good.
That's great. What kind of kid were you? Athlete, bookworm, troublemaker, all the above?
I don't know if you'd be surprised, but I was very cautious. I was a mediocre athlete at best. when I was young, when I was really young. And then I was always thinking ahead and just kind of like just a quiet, like frozen kid. And then after a while, I was around adults a lot. I went to Montessori school and I was around adults a lot and talked to like an adult. So I would prefer to engage with adults. And I had a hard time connecting to kids. It was really hard. I was like, you're not saying anything that I want to hear. So I just sit there and smile, and then
Yeah.
as time went on, we moved a ton, and we moved from one part of Orange County to another part of Orange County. And when we made those moves, the culture between, like, looking back was just night and day. Like, we'd go to like an affluent, area that was relatively new money. Most of the people that were living in that area were white. I mean, I'm half white, or I'm half Mexican, half Dutch. So like, I really don't, that's about as Californian as you get, right? Everybody's just mixed. So I just looked at everybody like everybody. And then I never really felt weird until I got somewhere. I'm like, oh, wow, all these people are rich. All these people are different. And everybody, and they've all lived here forever. None of them have moved. And I move every year. You know what I mean? So I always felt like kind of displaced. And then all of a sudden I'd move, and then I'm in Fullerton and it's predominantly Mexican and everybody speaks Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. So it was always a culture shock. And looking back, it was really unsettling as a kid. But now, like, thank God, because I don't really get unsettled, wake up anywhere.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that helps with just like your ability to evolve and be able to be quickly adaptable based on your environment and the people that you're around. But as a kid, I'm sure that experience was different. What caused you guys to move so much? Was it work or just, various things within the family?
So my oldest brother and my dad, my oldest brother's my dad's. They didn't have any restrictions to stay anywhere as long as they stayed in Orange County, because he would go see his mom, stuff like that. And he was doing a lot of visiting them in the summer, and their family, the Adkins side, they're big into racing. So my older brother, he ended up working for Hendricks Motorsports, got into NASCAR, did it for 25 years. He just retired. And I mean, he was like the guy, but he was one of the 4 or 5 suspension foremans in NASCAR. Like, most teams don't have a suspension foreman. They have like a guy that does it as an ancillary duty. He was the guy. So he's a total guru when it comes to suspension brakes for race cars. And it's funny because he's a big dude. I mean, he's a big dude, and he was always into go-karts. Now he runs a company called Kart Guru. He has a full-blown race team, and he's got a bunch of pit crew teams, kids that are, because that's the pathway to NASCAR. So he runs those teams for him. And he's this giant dude, and we used to go to, these little go-kart tracks, and I'm like, there's no way. You outweigh us by 100 pounds. And he just kicked the crap out of all of us. You know what I mean? And like, he's such a good driver. If he would have focused on driving, or we would have had any money, hands down, he would have been a race car driver for sure.
That's awesome.
But he was doing that. My other older brother, my mom's older brother, Gino, his side of the family's in Whittier. And we were all close. We all got along. There was never any static or issues or anything like that. But we just wanted to keep everybody close. But aerospace at the time was really kind of tumultuous. So my dad would kind of have highs and lows. And my mom started a transcribing business called Cheetah Keys. And it just wore her out. So she went through really, really tough, like, had to take on the whole company on her own. And then my dad left aerospace to help her with her company. And it just didn't work out. It all just fell. So we were doing super well, and then boom, bellied out. So it was an experience, to say the least. So we were kind of between cities every year for a little while. And it was probably easier on me and my little brother because we were young enough to go with the flow. But my older brothers, I mean, they're a little grittier. So it probably because of that, because they were in junior high, and
Sure.
so they felt the brunt of it more than we did.
Right. Who are some of your, major role models or biggest influences as a kid?
Tons. I mean, I'm kind of like a cliche 90s kid. You know what I mean? I grew up watching all the Stallone, Schwarzenegger movies. That, to me, those were the standard. And my dad was always like, nobody was better than my dad. So I was one of those kids. He was not like the Schwarzenegger type, right? He's not a big guy. He was an athlete, didn't work out, didn't do all that stuff. He just kind of, everything was for the kids. But he just had a demeanor about him that was calm, cool, collected, and everybody they just loved him. So he was my main, my main hero. And then my older brothers, when they got into high school, they were the best athletes in whatever they did. So they set the bar. By the time I made it to high school, I was looking at them like, okay, like I want to be like them. I didn't use anybody else besides my two older brothers, my dad, and then all the athletes of the time.
Yeah. So looking back, was there a moment or experience, or was it more of people or individuals that planted the seed for, the discipline, service, leadership that you eventually evolved into who you are today? Do you feel like that was highly influenced by some of your experiences or the people that you were just around?
You know, I've been really lucky, and now since finding my faith again, I don't think it's by accident at all. It's not by accident. Because I wasn't smart enough to do it. But when I was young, I had really good mentors, and I watched my dad had a set of friends that were a little older than him. He had this friend Chuck. He was such a cool dude. He had no kids. Him and his wife were super well off. They'd go on like African safaris. We'd go over to their house, and they had these big stuffed, exotic animals. And I always thought it was cool. He had a little Mini Cooper, a Mini Cooper S from the 60s. It was pristine. He was just a cool guy. He probably had more worth on his wrist, with his watch than we owned as a family. And he loved my dad, And it was, he knew my dad was, just a really good dude with something super important. And part of it was his family. And he was like just in awe at having four sons and what that was like. And he didn't have that. He wasn't envious by no means, but he wanted to see my dad do good. So he said, "Hey man, I want to see you do well. If you have any questions about anything, man." And then they struck up a friendship. But he was like 10 years ahead of my dad, maybe 15. I watched their relationship when I was like 10. And I saw like, oh, this isn't a regular friendship. This is a mentorship, right? And it didn't click until later on in life. And then when my dad put me into the same high school that my older brothers went to, and we could never afford to be in that area. At times we were doing better or not, but we always, Yorba Linda is where Esperanza High School is at, and Yorba Linda kind of sits in Anaheim, like right on the edge of Anaheim, but it served Yorba Linda before Yorba Linda High School was there. So Yorba Linda had a ton of money and tons of people. It was a huge high school, and it was so big they had to split it. So when I was there, it was monstrous. Thousands of kids. And it was your quintessential giant high school in Southern California, right? That had affluence. And we lived in the not rich area. There wasn't really a poor area. There was just not really rich area. And we struggled just to be in that area at any time. And we still couldn't stay in certain places. We had to move and stuff like that. And so all of our friends were living in multi-million-dollar houses. Most of my friends had no worries. Like they just, just get what I want. You know what I mean? Like, and their parents were awesome people. They were nice people, but they were hardworking people. It's just, they didn't grow up the same. They just didn't. They didn't know that, like, if the next morning they were going to wake up and then your parents were going to drop it on you, "Hey, we're going to move next week." And you're like,
Right.
"Oh, okay. All right, cool." It was weird. Looking back, it wasn't that big of a deal, but as a kid, it felt like a lot. So once we moved, my dad said, "I have to keep him there because the coaches at that high school were good people." And then I realized once I got there, our coaches took care of me, and I looked up to them because they were amazing people. Our defensive coordinator, Coach Pendleton, was amazing. That guy, literally, he was an English teacher, and and I was a decent athlete, but he knew me because my brothers were great at did a lot of work for that school, and were team captains and stuff like that. And so his son and I were the same age, and his son, super sharp guy, monstrous dude, and was super successful. And of course, like everybody in high school, you either listen and then do your work and get good grades, or you chase girls and do. I chose those two, and I'm like, I'm smart enough to get by. I'll be right. And then he goes, "Oh, okay." So Coach P, when I was in, like frosh off football, he pulled me into one of his classes on purpose, and then put me right in the front, and my desk touched his desk. And it wasn't like abuse or anything, but in the 90s, you were allowed to be a little tougher on kids. There's a classroom of 30 kids, And, I'd be sitting there doing something and I'd kind of zone off and you go, hey, and you reach over and smack me in the head. Whoa, okay, I'm back. But he is a super intelligent guy. Looking back, we were way ahead of our time. Our weight room in the 90s, we had one or two bench machines, and we didn't have any squat racks. We didn't have anything. It was all platforms for Olympic lifting. So all of us competed in Olympic lifting. So there was like 12 or 13 platforms, bumper plates, the whole bit. We were way ahead of our time. So he was a really, really smart guy, and you felt it. You felt his intelligence. He's also big, giant, I mean, he was like the Stallone Schwarzenegger type, right? Like visually. So to see those two things, he was always pretty calculated, didn't lose his mind unless he was on the field, which was fun. But he was just a good dude. And I remember my dad entrusted us boys to certain people on purpose, and he was one of them. And his work ethic was crazy, and his mental toughness was bananas. I mean, my brother told me, he goes, hey, he goes, you get with Coach P, don't you ever lie to him, and you bust your ass. Like you do everything he says. So, okay. And he goes, toughest dude I know. He told me a story where he had shoulder surgery, and I mean, literally staples still in his shoulder. He's fresh out of shoulder surgery, and he just wanted to see, he walked in and everyone's doing practice and he's moving his shoulders, finally getting, mobility, but the staples are still in it. All the guys are doing bench press. He moves the guys out of the way, 300 pounds, puts it up, and he goes, okay. And just didn't say a word, didn't anything. And everybody's just like, why? Like you know what I mean? And now as an adult, I'm like, okay, this is like, I see the things I liked in him. You know what I mean? And he created great athletes. He was also our track and field coach. So he, like, I'm far too short to be a discus thrower, but I was the second best discus thrower on the relay team to his son, who's like 6'5", 270 pounds. And in discus, the biggest thing is length. Well, I can only get so long. They can't teach me to be any longer, right? So, I had to be perfect in my form, or as perfect as possible. And if I didn't have a coach that understood how to create a high level thrower, I mean, I would never be competitive. There's no way. He taught me so many things that enabled me to have experiences that were probably bigger than my body. You know what I mean? I was a middle linebacker, and I'm too small to be a middle linebacker. I'm, 5'9", 220, and not necessarily fast, but he was so technical that I could read offenses extremely well because of him. And I could do all these things because of like his guidance. And it was really, it was him that really set a specific discipline, so he was surrounded by such an awesome cadre of coaches. I mean, the head coach, Coach Gary Meek, he just passed away. He was the best. If you were to think of a head football coach in the NFL that everybody loved, like everybody wanted to play for him, but was also sharp, smart, compassionate, but strong. Dude, that's the guy. And he's surrounded by dudes that they got the rub, right? So they were the same. So, when you're around these big groups of people, you're like, oh, dude, I want to be like these people. Like, this is what success looks like. And that school had a lot of booster help. I mean, there's tons of coaches, and we had 100 kids in our frosh off, 100 kids in our JV and varsity. So there's 200 football players at any time, minimum. We had more than that, quite a bit. And I mean, it was just packed. It was packed. There was people that literally never dressed out for a football game because there's just too many people through 4 years of school. So those guys were huge. There was a time in between when I stopped playing football and when I got into law enforcement. There was a few years where I was just lost because I didn't have anybody, besides my dad. And my dad was kind of in a different season of life. Like, him and my mom are like, okay, we have one left in high school. We are going to start thinking about, this future empty nest, right? So they're in a different spot. And then once I got to law enforcement, it was in Arizona. I walked out of the academy, and literally the day I walked into the police department, Nick Sessions, God rest his soul, man. He was such a great guy. He just grabs it was 5 of us, just under his wing. We walked out, and he goes, come here, guys. I got you. You're going to do what I do. And at the time, he was a sergeant. He ended up a captain. And and he passed away from COVID. But all the way up to that point, he was a guy that, he was from Southern California. Well, he was technically from Philadelphia, which you felt that. But then he moved to Southern California, met his wife, and then they moved to Arizona. He was a guy that he was kind of old school. You were supposed to give back. You were supposed to serve. You were supposed to be a mentor for nothing in return. And he knew that. He was part of the Kiwanis. He was a part of the Lions. He was part of all the clubs in town. He wasn't politicking. He wasn't trying to be something he wasn't trying to be a leader. He just was a leader because you do what you're supposed to do. I mean, people follow leaders because they're supposed to be leaders, not because they want them to follow them, right? And most of the best leaders that I've ever encountered are those people that are like, dude, I don't want to be a leader. It's more work. It's too much. But you're just supposed to, because what are you supposed to do? Just ignore everybody? Like, no, you're supposed to do your job, right? And so he was one of those guys, and I was watching him do that, watching him take his time and do these things. And then he also had a really strong faith. And we had a lot of conversations. Like, I think a lot of people tried to be his peer. They didn't let him be their mentor. And he was my mentor until a certain point where I think we enjoyed each other so much. We started treating each other like peers. And then he would get reminded he's my mentor, and it would kind of bum him out because he wanted a peer, right? So, but it was a relationship that definitely set apart like my trajectory of my life.
Yeah.
And that was a time that, like, again, all that was by chance. And then all of a sudden, while I'm spending time with him, I realized if I choose my mentors wisely, they will help me see things ahead so I don't step in holes, right? And it really helped. And then to do that for other people, I don't ever feel qualified to do that for other people, but I just help. And that's, I think in his mind, he was just helping. He probably had no idea that he was shaping.
Gave you a clear understanding of the impact of mentorship and coaching.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, Roland, you bring up a good point when you talk about how your parents, I think I try and put myself in their shoes. And I think so many people can relate that are parents and have kids, that when they get to see somebody else outside of them be such a huge influence on their kids, because they're not going to always be around. They have work. They have other kids to take care of. They have all aspects of their life. And so to know when your kid is going off to school or as part of an extracurricular activity, and to see that, oh, this person is really helping shape and mold my child, I can't imagine how impactful. Because when you were saying, we definitely couldn't have afforded to go to that school, but we did because my dad saw the value that these coaches had in me. And you bring up something that I feel like every athlete, as well as anybody that pursues, a hobby or passion, and you get to this realization of knowing, like, okay, if I was a foot taller, or if I was just a little bit faster, or had a little bit longer arm span, or whatever it may be, there's always the wishes or the woulda, shoulda, couldas, and all of that. You start to realize that you have to work with what you're given. And so I think one important thing too for a coach to help a kid realize is you're not going to get a foot taller overnight. And growth spurts are pretty crazy in junior high and high school for kids, but knowing you are this tall, you are this strong, what can we do to highlight your skills and work off of those, and then go from there. And I think that's just really, really cool too. And that you were able to get that. It sounds like you got all of that through wrestling, football, and then track.
And Olympic weightlifting. So we had an Olympic weightlifting team. Sometimes I feel like my life was like Forrest Gump, because I'll say something and then someone goes, "Oh my God, I know that guy," right? It's weird. So our Olympic weightlifting team, we used to go to Chula Vista for the EWA Nationals, and that's where they held it. Well, for my last 2 years, I did pretty well, like in clean and jerk and snatch, but my clean and jerk was far better than my snatch because of balance and flexibility and just, and I was doing this because my coach was doing it when we had a huge team that would go, and I'd lose every year by maybe 15, 20 kilos to Casey Bergman. And this kid he was a super nice kid, but I'd always see him there and his dad, and he had narrow shoulders, big traps, big quads, but just wasn't imposing. Like you would not this hulking athlete you would expect. And his snatch was significant. He beat me by quite a few kilos in that, and his weight was a little bit lower. But his dad looked at me, goes, your hands are small. You probably shouldn't have started doing this. And I was like, dude, screw you. Like, what do you know? And I got so mad. I was like, oh, and that's how I remember it. I'm sure it was totally nice, and he didn't say it that way. But that's what's in my brain. And I'm like, dude, this Coach Bergman guy, I'll punch him in his face, man. I can't believe he said that to me. And I never brought it up to anybody, never said anything. I thought he was trying to psych me out so his kid would win. He obviously would never do that. His dad was right. I have small hands. So my grip, anything, like if I put straps on, my PR would go through the roof. But anything I could hold on to, I could get up. Go figure. I was telling somebody, like, yeah, I was like, I've done some Olympic lifting. I used to do it in high school. My coaches were pretty good at it. They were Olympic level, I think 3 coaches. And they were like, oh yeah. And I go, yeah, I lost to Casey and this man kicking my ass. I wonder what he ever did. And they were like, he went to Beijing in the Olympics, and he's like one of the guys in CrossFit that's people worship this guy. Oh no, I had no idea. I had no idea. I had no idea. So, I was super lucky. California in that time, it was hard to not bump into people that became super influential or high level athletes, because it was just a time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
But getting back to your other point, I didn't know that, what you get is what you get. Right. And to just kind of compare yourself to yourself and not have the shoulda, woulda, couldas. I had the shoulda, woulda, couldas until I was a purple belt. So probably until I was, like in my late 30s. And the jiu-jitsu process mentally, I wish that would have been first before stick and ball sports. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Stick and ball sports and that kind of competition is such an intense pressure cooker, especially for kids. Like the things that stick in your head is wild. Some of the thoughts that I thought that were wrong shaped my entire life up until I figured out, oh my God, that was wrong. It was a huge trajectory, not to totally change subject, but when my mom's business kind of fell, my mom was basically overworked and didn't have enough transcribers to do the work. So she was doing it all. So I remember when my brother was a baby, she would have him laying on her lap and she would sit there and type, and I would be in the room, coloring or something. And just to this day, if I hear keys, like typing, I get tired, because we usually would fall asleep with her transcribing all through the night. So she was trying to keep up with the business, and she just had a breakdown. And, she had to go to the hospital. It was like psychiatric care, and it was a huge adjustment for our family, because I didn't know what any of that was, and my mom was just worn out. She did the work of 10 people. I mean, it was unreal what she shouldered. And my dad was worn out because he's shouldering so much more too. Sometimes too much is too much. And so she felt that. And as kids, we're seeing it without an understanding. And so we don't know, like it's kind of weird. It's kind of shameful, I guess. Like you feel that way, but that's not, and then when she got out, she was like, okay, well, we're going to church. So I remember the pastor, Casey Treat, in the 90s. I don't know what denomination, but I think it's Pentecostal, where they like speak in tongues and stuff like that. And we didn't go to church. My dad was Catholic, my mom was Christian, but we didn't never attend it. So we went, and these people, like everyone around us is starting to speak in tongues, and they're trying to like just get everybody going, and we're like sitting in the front row, and this is day one of this, and we're trying to like process, like, dude, my mom just came out of the hospital yesterday, and now Pentecostal church, and people are speaking in tongues, and I have no idea what's going on. And they were preaching about revelations. And the only thing I remember, they were saying, okay, this is the process, right? One day you're going to wake up and God's going to take back the people, the believers. And then he's going to leave the strongest to fight next to the angels against demons. That's what I heard. That's not the case, but that's what I heard. And I was like, no, I'm definitely getting left. I was like, 100%. I mean, my brothers are monsters, and I'm probably going to grow up to be like them. So I'm definitely going to have to fight. Oh, I'm definitely getting left. I'm in training camp. Here we go. So literally that has been in the back of my head since I was like 7 years old. And then we didn't go back to church. And my mom and my dad used to bicker. It was hilarious because it was kind of cute. Like, so my dad's first marriage, he was married in the Catholic Church. So when you get divorced in the Catholic Church, you have to get everything approved and have your certificate and all this stuff. And you have to be divorced through the Catholic Church. You know, you have to be divorced in the eyes of God. Otherwise, you're married into eternity. And that used to piss my mom off because she was like, you never did that. You never did that. We're going to be married. And then you're going to be with her. But again, we didn't go to church. We didn't study the Bible. Now as an adult, I laugh. I'm like, don't you read the Bible? We're all going to be brothers and sisters up there. It's not like that. Like, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it was funny because my mom would get so pissed at my dad and my dad would get mad. And then we drive by every time we drove by a Catholic church, my dad, sign of the cross, right? My mom goes, why are you doing that? Well, you don't even go to church. And then they just get bicker. And we just sit in the back and listen to them bicker. And it was funny. They ended up laughing at the end of it. But yeah, getting that wrong steered my whole life. And so, I mean, I think until I met my wife and we started going to church, my wife's like, that's not how it goes, right? I was like, are you sure? She goes, yeah. And I went, oh, wow. But you don't realize when you're young what you take as gospel.
Right.
And I think that, it's so important for children, not just adults, so important for children to grow up with faith and to grow up in the church, because it's a system where you have built-in mentors, you have built-in guidance, everything's built in. And, I mean, there are good churches and bad churches, and I get that. But it's like jiu-jitsu. When you look at a black belt, they got his black belt when he's, in his 40s and never started jiu-jitsu until his 20s, right? Or maybe 30s. That black belt moves different than someone who grew up in jiu-jitsu their whole life and then they don't even move like a human being, right? I mean, Tyrotolo moves, or the way that, Kolabate moves, right? They don't even move like human beings. The stuff that they do is
so naturally.
So natural, right? And it's because it's their time under tension, right? Then your body just adapts. It's the same thing with your...
Like that term, time under tension.
Yeah, it's all time under tension, right? I mean, that's the difference. That's how you gain experience. So when you have someone who doesn't grow up in the church and they find it later, they're excited. Everything is just, it pops, right? You really feel the presence. You really feel the presence of God because you spent so much time without it. And maybe you have more of an appreciation, but the expression sometimes is in your life is so much cleaner and smoother when you start there, right? And so when you see these kids that have a life event or something going on, whatever, they lean on God. They understand. They don't have that wonder. They don't have that I'm going to get left behind and I have to fight demons my whole life. That's crazy. It's crazy. But, when people understand the word, they spend their time in the Bible. It's not about just quoting the Bible. It's not memorization. It's you need that time for it to sit in the back of your head and your subconscious and work and work and work. And then all of a sudden you get, like Sophia the other day, I mean, tells me something about something that she read in the book of James, and it was profound. And I was like, you're a teenager. Wow. And I'm like, I don't think I've read through the entire book of James. Wow. Okay. All right. You got it. So, that is a super, super important thing. If you can give your children the foundation to grow up with time under tension, so you don't have to compress it all, or not give the opportunity for a major mistake where, you mistake scripture and then, something happens at church where people push you away, not the book or not the message. And you get fixated on the people. The word will keep you where you're supposed to be. I got ran out of the church because I back in high school and had a occurrence that just, I was like, never again. I'm out. People are hypocrites. And it pushed me away. And thank God that's, when you come back as an adult and you realize, man, I was so lucky. There's no such thing as luck, man. It's all the grace of God just bumping you in like, no. I have another plan for you, another plan for you, another plan for you. And it really takes away that shoulda, woulda, coulda, because it shouldn't have nothing. It was supposed to be like, I needed those experiences to be here to do that.
Well, and it's cool, Roland. I love that the very first question we were talking about how you grew up, and you're like, I had a awesome childhood. Yet you're going through a lot of these circumstances and challenges, and you're talking about them in such a positive manner. And I think that's just goes to show the person that you are. Because, not a lot of people can go through moving a ton of times when they were a kid and go through a divorced family and experiencing just a split household and understanding that lifestyle. Exploration into religion and the variety and doubts that can come into those environments. I just think it's cool the way that you talk about some of these experiences, that some people can really hold on to them in a very negative way, where it sounds like they really shaped you and it helped you approach life now today in a very positive way. So that's cool.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, a lot of people my age, middle-aged people are, that's the biggest age there where people are like, okay, they start looking for religion again. And it's really easy to discount religion. It's so easy. Because I mean, I did it through my 20s. I was like, yeah, religion's for people that need it. It's to comfort people for the impending doom that's coming, right? And then you start getting arrogant. And I was super arrogant. I mean, and then I flirted with being an atheist for a while. Like, I wouldn't categorize myself as that, more like agnostic. Like, I knew there was something bigger, but I didn't think it was in control. It was just watching, right? Like, that was it. And I didn't really give any weight to religion. I thought it was just something that made people feel better. And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm okay. And I didn't realize that that's what made me feel better. Like, oh, I'm in control. I'm steering the ship. I'm the master of my destiny. I can do anything, right? This, the whole Oprah mindset, right? Like, oh, I can will anything to happen. And that makes you feel good because you feel like you're the one completely in power, and then actually you're empowering yourself with kind of lies, man. I mean, you have to realize, like, no, you have a purpose. You have a purpose of service. And, that will steer all of your decisions and it'll give you a peace, right? If God wills it, God's going to will it. And that is actual peace. And then when you start reading the Bible, you start reading, you put Bible and history right over top of each other and you realize they align perfectly. And then now that you've found that, it's like you discovered something. You're like, okay, so now I have to manage this and not be that guy who's like, you were wrong and you were wrong. This is right. And then now you have to manage your personality. And what's real evangelism, right? Real evangelism is not telling everybody that you're going to hell. You're going to hell. Everybody's going to hell. You're all sinners. That doesn't help anybody. You know what I mean? And so actual evangelism is you're being a bon vivant, right? Living a good life, right? Like you have to do it as well as you can. And, as well for yourself, but as well as for other people, because you're all in it together. And it has to be attractive, and it will be attractive to other people. And people go, wait, where's this peace that you get? Where's this understanding that you get? Because on the outside, because you don't have to shift gears because you have that time under tension and it's smooth, right? You have all this time. People are like, man, you make it look so easy. And you're like, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's still, it hurts all the way through. It's just like watching a black belt and a white belt, right? Or a black belt and a blue belt, right? Blue belts are doing moves and, they're smooth, but, they're kind of clunky, but kind of almost smooth. And they get jiu-jitsu. And then you watch a black belt and it looks like they're just falling. Everything falls into place so easily. And it's like, man, dude, you just make this look so easy. It's not. It's just as hard as it is for you. It's no different, right? It's no different. I just have more time under tension. So now I'm not forcing anything to happen. I'm taking what I get. It's no different in life when you see people that are trying to force things that happen, forcing it. They're chasing their wants. I got to chase my wants. And they don't understand what their needs are.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you seek out that constant control that you're talking about, you almost get tunnel vision, where you stop, being aware of all these doors and paths that are opening and very ready to take on a new role or, opportunity. Yet we are so focused on what we think that we need to be doing or the path that we want to take on. And that maybe closes up these circumstances that could really lead into some great things in our life.
I found it wild that the president of El Salvador, there was an interview he was doing, and basically he won his second term. In his first term, he basically eradicated all of the gang violence, all the MS-13, and put all the bad guys in these wild prisons, right? And that's all controversial and whatever, but the capital city, San Salvador, was one of the most dangerous places in El Salvador. One of my friends got shot that I used to work with got shot on a street corner in San Salvador for random violence for gang initiations. So I know people that have been hurt by this stuff, and this was the norm. This was totally the norm. And now it's safer than DC, way safer than DC. And it's one of the safest South American countries, and if not the safest. And he's done such a great job. And now he's doing this interview and he's focusing on, next he wants to get into his economy. And he says, we have a very small GDP. We're a small country, blah, blah, blah. So basically they asked him, how do you start your cabinet meetings and in your meetings in your government? And he goes, we pray for God's guidance. Could you imagine? I was sitting there thinking, like, sitting down, a government sits down, everybody at the table, and everybody prays for God's guidance, right? And then around the same time, I listened to a Jesuit priest was talking, and he was literally like, every morning I start my morning with a prayer to Jesus to ask him, please don't let me deceive myself. I want your guidance, but don't let me twist it to follow what I want. I want to do what you want.
Yeah.
Just this whole mindset was wild, but it just makes so much sense. It just makes so much sense.
Well, and it sounds like you talk about you kind of found really the purpose of Christianity and your faith once you met Jonna. So before we get there, let's go back because we were in high school. You talked about the 4 sports that you were involved in. Do you think in your path into law enforcement and martial arts, was that just kind of inevitable? Or do you think there was a turning point that set you on that road? How did you end up from Southern California to Arizona in walking into the police academy? Like what happened there?
Lots.
Okay.
So in high school, all my effort went into sports. So, I was a captain on all the teams. We had a really good football season. I broke the tackles for a season, the tackles for the career, led the team in interceptions on a team that, all the guys on the team, they were bigger, better, stronger than me. Our outside linebackers were monsters. They were way better. They all went to Division I and Division II schools. Our defensive line, they all went to military academies and Division I schools. Our secondary, they all did. It was, everybody went somewhere. And I didn't have the grades because I focused more on the team because I really, my heart and soul was on the team.
Mm-hmm.
And there were moments where I really felt that some people were in it for themselves, and I didn't realize that. I assumed everybody had the same engagement that I did. And I was like, oh, man, I probably should have maybe focused more on school. So when everybody else left and they went, I was like, I got to go to a JC and play football. And so the coach from Rancho Santiago and the coach from Fullerton, I had gotten emails from, said, hey, we'd really like you to play here. And all my buddies, some of the other guys that had gone to those schools were like, hey, dude, the coaches are waiting for you. And I waited the whole summer because I had this weird feeling like, oh, I'm going to, San Jose, I know they said that I needed to do a year over here, but if I didn't, I could go there. They'll make an exception, right? Because my dad always said, oh, if you're good enough, you'll find a way in. That's not true. So I just sat around and waited, and the last day you could register for college in junior college in California, that day I was driving. I left my house and I went, okay, turn left and get on the freeway and go to Rancho Santiago, or make a right and go to Fullerton. This is literally how I made my decision. And I remember, I'll never forget that song, I Hope You Dance by Leanne.
Yeah.
It came on and I'm like, this is not the song I need right now. I need to know whether I go left or I go right. I don't know where to go. I was, what the hell is going on? This is not a manly thing to be happening right now. Right. And then I just went, and I knew that I knew more people at Santiago, and I already felt like a disappointment. So I was like, I'm going to go right. And so I went right. And then I went to Fullerton, and they had a middle linebacker that was 6'2", 220. He was in his 3rd year there. He was ready to move out to go on to a Division I. And I'm like, dude, I'm way better than that guy. And I mean, hands down, I was 10 times the linebacker that guy was. And they're like, no, you don't understand. Junior college football is not about winning games. Junior college football is about getting tape and then getting to the next level, which I think is 100% right. My brain was wrong. I was like, but I'm the best. I need to play. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. So I took a lot of positives and made it negative. And then it kind of followed. So after the first season, I'd go in for a series and I'd make 3 big plays. And they're like, dude, you have enough tape for half the season. We're good, man. We're pulling you out. Pull the next guy. I'm like, what are you doing? This is crazy. And then we played Palomar City College. And I remember this guy in junior college, you either get Division I talent that should have been at USC, but they were boneheads in high school and they just need to get their grades up real quick and go on. Or you get dudes that couldn't make varsity. So there's a huge gap. So, which made me feel like I was even better than I was. And then all of a sudden I met one of those guys. And I remember it was on a special teams thing. It was no big deal. And he comes out to block me. And this dude's 6'6", 220 pounds, or 6'7", 220 pounds. He ended up becoming like a dual athlete. And anybody, if somebody grabbed, somebody had my shoulder pads, I could club and rip past anybody. I never worried about any of it. This dude grabs me like a child, shakes me and throws me on the ground. Was like, that doesn't happen. Man, I've played against Deshaun Foster. I played against Ray Mikowitz. Like, there's no way this guy, I mean, those guys were monsters, but in my mind, it was comparison of people. Right. And I was already feeling down, and it was the first time I quit. I was like, I don't need to be doing this. I'm not Division I. I'm not this. I'm not that. And the next thing you know, I was working at a pizza place, and one of the guys that was working there, he was him and I ended up becoming really good friends. And it was like a 90s movie, like Waiting. Remember that movie, Waiting, with like just a comedy, like a raunchy comedy of just being in your 20s and being in purgatory and just like working all night, sleeping all day and making nothing and feeling like you're going nowhere. So him and I we'd work, and we'd run the pizza place till 10:30 and clean up until 11:30, and then we'd stand out in the back with some of the other employees eating free pizza and drinking beer and just talking about just the dumbest things until 2 a.m. It was just, I'm like, oh my God, this is my life. Like, it happened so fast. And I was still eating like a professional athlete, but not doing the athlete stuff. So I'm getting chubbier and chubbier and fatter and fatter. And I don't realize I'm losing athleticism. So I'm like, oh, I'm never going back. Right. So I got into, and then he went into banking, and, he did me a solid and got me an interview. And then I got into banking, and the banking life was so sedentary and so transactional, and everything was transactional. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? And there was this like customer service veil that made everything feel appropriate, but it was just gross. I was around a bunch of I ended up getting into mortgages right before the bubble. I'm like, man, these people have less of a soul than car salesmen. This is terrible. But the veil, it made it look pretty because they all had money. So, they were more presentable. Right. So anyways, I spent a little bit of time doing that. Before I got into the loans, I worked for a training department, and it was right after I was working new accounts in a training department. And I realized there was always moments where like I'm reminded you're not supposed to be here. And it's just weird. All of a sudden it's like, oh shit, I'm not supposed to be here. I used to work for a company called Downey Savings and Loan. And it was started by Mr. McAllister. And it's kind of weird how this all kind of loops in. But he was the founder and the owner. And he lived in Bullhead City, Arizona. Newport Beach, right? Like thinking I'm living my best life, riding motorcycles every day to work and, living the California lifestyle, right? And I got a intercompany promotion to the training department because I didn't know any better. So I would talk to anybody. Like, yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do this and this and this. Okay. Yeah. And cool people are like, he seems confident. We should take his training. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, do you know what you're talking about? No. 19. Right. So I was like 19, 20, and they hire me, and there's no place for birthday on an intercompany. It's only on your application to come into the company. But if you are going to another division, they just want to know who you work for, how much time, and what division. So they were like, oh, he's a new accounts guy. Yeah, we'll put him in here. Oh yeah, okay. Had no idea I was 19. No idea, because I chubbied up. I grew a beard. Dude looks 40, right? And talks to everybody, right? I worked for the training department for, a couple years, and right about a year and a half while I was there, I get to know the manager really well. I get to know their family, get to know all the other trainers, right? And I'm like one of the guys. I was there for a year. And then one of the girls I worked with, I mean, she was 27, 28. And they were like, oh, it's our baby's birthday. Everybody come in. Oh, she's the baby. She's the baby. I'm like, the baby? What? And all of a sudden they're like, happy 27th birthday. And she goes, thanks. And I went, and my eyes got big and she saw me and I was like, oh no, they have no idea. They have no idea how old I am. So afterwards, Brandy goes, hey, hey, you want to get lunch? A couple days later. And she's like, yeah. So we go get lunch. She goes, how old are you? And I was like, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. And she's like, seriously, I saw your eyes when they said I was the baby and your eyes got big. And I turned 20. And she goes, what? She goes, oh my God. She goes, you got hired at 19 years old and you're teaching branch managers how to run the bank. And I was like, uh-huh. And she goes, what are you doing? Don't tell the manager. Because her son worked in the mailroom. He was 6 months older than I was, but he looked like a child. So he would come up and, everybody treat him like a kid. And he'd be like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, hey, what's happening? And she goes, oh, and the manager thought it was so cool that I was being nice to her son. She had no idea whether they were the same age. And so one day she was like, hey, this little birdie told me that you're younger than I thought you were. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, oh shit. She goes, you can't tell anyone how old you are. I'm like, okay, that's totally fine. And I knew my clock started in there. Like I had to.
You're like, little do you guys know, I've been doing this for years. Back in Montessori school, I was hanging out with the adults, the teachers. Like, this is who I am.
It's crazy, right? So it was funny because when I'd go to different parts of California and teach these classes, and an adult would plan this out right and go up a day early and drive all their supplies up and this and that. Nope, not me. I put a tank bag on my motorcycle, shipped all my stuff to myself, and I drove up that night just in anger, right, on my sport bike, flying it up there, right? So everybody thought I was a cool trainer because I was a kid, but nobody knew I was a kid. They just thought I was cool. And then after class, we all stayed in the same hotel. So they were like, hey, do you want to come down to the bar? I can't. Literally, I can't. I couldn't tell them that I couldn't drink. And then they're like, oh, we get it. We get it. So it was a weird experience, but I knew like, oh, dude, I'm not supposed to be there. And then I went into and just was terrible. And it was just purgatory. It's purgatory. And my health went to shit. And I knew I always wanted to be a cop because when I was in high school, I was late to school so much that my favorite, all the seniors give their jersey to a teacher at the senior assembly, and all these people are giving their to different teachers. And I'm going to do it to the attendance lady because I've known her for 4 years because I see her all the time because I'm always late. Saved my ass. And she's a great person. She really was. She was a former LASO and her husband was an LASO and the sheriff's office. And she was like, you should be a cop. I can see you being a cop. I go, I don't know. And she goes, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I go, I want to wear a suit and carry a gun. She goes, why? And I'm like, I don't know. It sounds cool. And she goes, well, you could be a cop or in the mafia and benefits are a little better as a cop. There's a little more longevity. I was like, okay, well, think about it. So it always kind of stuck in the back of my head. And to me, it was stability. And then I finally said, okay, it's time. Like, I'm going to go be a cop. So I left and left banking because my brother knew my head was all over the place. Hey, dude, do you want to come out and tried being on the pit crew? Because my brother was on the pit crew too for Jimmy Johnson. He was the gas man. And so he's like, come out and go over the wall. And I was like, okay. So I went out to Hendricks Motorsports, met Chad Canas, like a dumbass. I'd look at him and, he goes, hey man, what? And Chad's a little abrasive. Chad's a very direct person to, people that follow NASCAR. And he was Jimmy Johnson's pit crew chief for years. I think now he's the CEO of Hendricks Motorsports, I think. But he literally goes, where do you see yourself in 10 or in the future? And I said, in your seat. And he goes, oh really? I go, yeah. I said, I want to work. I'm going to work hard and work my way all the way to the top. And he goes, and the only reason I said that was not because I meant it, because I thought, because that stupid mindset of like, tell them what they want to hear. And I thought you were supposed to say I was not genuine at all. But he knew I was a dumb kid. And he was like, all right, well, okay, dumb kid. Well, your brother's awesome. So we'll let you stay.
Sure.
So I got an internship there where every day, rain or shine, there was a race car. I'd wake up and I'd go work out with the pit crew team. So I'd work out for like 4 hours. And then I would go to pit practice and I'd drive the pit car. So I'd pull in and drive Jeff Gordon's, pit car that I could barely fit my butt into because he's such a little guy, right? All sideways, and this car is 1,000 horsepower. And the first time I almost killed everybody because I didn't know you have to warm the brakes up. So like, I mean, I'm always in over my head and slam on the brakes, and all of a sudden the first person in front of the car is the jack man. He's like, whoa, here he comes. And I'm like, boom, and I blow the pit box. And they were like, dude, your brother's an idiot. And I'm like, yep, I'm an idiot. Here we go. Come back around, and, and I would help with pit practice. And then, there was a bunch of downtime where I could do kind of whatever I wanted. So I would go at Hendricks Motorsports. It's like a city. And there was a building that had a shop car, and it was by the pit crew. It was kind of like a big metal building, like garage size. And it had one of the cup cars in there. I think it was a Busch car actually, but the jacking position was the same. And I was learning how to jack cars. So I grab a jack, and I'd walk to that deal, and I would stand on one side, and then I'd click the timer, jump off the wall, hit it, jack the car, and go through the process of piece by piece by piece to try to get faster. Because my brother, when he worked for Richard Petty's teams, I think he was Nemechek, and he worked for a bunch of drivers, but he was a jack man for a lot of guys. So my brother was one of the best jack men on pit road before he ended up being a gas man. And that was his weekend job, was going over the wall. So my brother was like, yeah, you can go over the wall. And it just, he's like, you're a good athlete. You're this, blah, blah, blah. Like, you could do this. And I'm like, you're right, I can do this. Was out there for a few months, and then they offered me a job. And I mean, looking back, like in 2002, making $85,000 a year as a general mechanic, on the road, race to race, in living in Charlotte. Oh my God, it was awesome. They offered it to me, and I was like, I gotta go home. No. I totally embarrassed my brother. And my brother never said, oh, you burned me, you this, you that. My brother never said that at all. He was like, hey man, didn't work out. It's totally fine. You did great while you're here. I did not expect.
Truly let you make that own decision.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I ran. Yeah. Oh, man, I ran. What
do you think was that had that?
Oh, I was just afraid. I was afraid, and I had no confidence in myself. I worked pretty hard. It was a degrading of confidence that was coming that happened after high school. And then, it was just not good. And I didn't realize what was happening until later. And then I got back into banking, and then, my parents bought a little place in Bullhead City, and they were like, hey, you should look at Bullhead. And I went and stayed the night out there at their little vacation trailer. I remember waking up, and the Terrible Herps gas station has this giant American flag, and where we were out on Silver Creek Road, you just see a sand mound and this giant American flag. And I was like, did I wake up on the moon? It's terrible. It's hot, and just there's nothing out here. And I hated it. But my mom was like, dude, you should totally come out here. We're coming out here with the family. So when I came back from North Carolina, my parents, were actually doing pretty well at that time. And my dad was killing it. We, as far as job wise, and he was like, hey, I think we're going to start setting up for retirement. So they bought a park model. It's like it's a short single wide. It's a short, thin wide. That's for like vacations. You see them at lakes and stuff. So they bought one in Anaheim at a little tiny trailer park that my parents would only go to when my dad would work. And then the weekends they took off, and they bought one in Bullhead until they figured out where they wanted to buy a house. So they were just bouncing between those two. So life happened. I chickened out. My brother had kind of a rough patch. We all came back home, and then my older brother had a rough patch and had to move in as well. So there was in a park model. My mom and my dad were in the bedroom. My brother and my little brother, he put on a little bit of weight, right? So anytime I refer to him in this, I'm always like, oh, and then my fat ass brother's laying next to me. We were on a futon, and we would lay on that thing, and they fold.
Uh-huh.
He was heavier than I was, so he would pull it this way so it would fold open like this. So we both almost would roll off all the time. And I'm like, I can't believe this is my life. I'm like, I'm 20 years old. I feel like I've just thrown everything in the toilet, and now I'm laying next to this fat guy, and this poor guy sitting there. He's going through it too, right? I mean, he's having a rough time, and we just I mean, it felt like a low point, but our family was together. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it was bad, but it felt like this is what always happens. Like things go great, it's inevitable. Bang, it's going to tank. It's just inevitable. Right. And so like it started that kind of that cycle. And then my mom, my parents were like, hey, you guys need to figure something out. We'll figure something out. And they always helped us. And they were like, why don't you come up to Bullhead and check it out? Right. So I got my job back at the bank and they said, hey, we have a transfer open to go to Bullhead City because all the branches were in California and then City. And I go, why is the Bullhead City one there? And they go, oh, Mr. McAllister lives out there. And I go, in Bullhead City? Why? He lives on the lake out in the middle of nowhere. He's a different kind of guy. He's old school. And I was like, and they're like, yeah, he drives an old 80s Caprice, but he goes into that branch and he was tired of paying fees. So he has one branch in Arizona. And I remember when I used to train all this stuff, there was like everything this, and then Arizona policies, Arizona this, Arizona that for one branch. Had a little museum for Nickelodeons. You know what those are?
For what?
The Nickelodeons. They're
Okay.
like automatic piano players. That was connected to our branch. And I'd walk in and I was like, dude, this is the weirdest. I don't get it. Culture shock like crazy. Rural Arizona, right? Like, this is nuts. I went out there because my parents said, hey, you should go out there and maybe you should be a cop out there. So that was like kind of my 1 year plan. I go out there. It's 125 degrees. Mr. McAllister shows up. He looks like he's worth $5. Walks in. We start shooting the breeze. I find out it's Mr. McAllister. And I go, oh, man. And he goes, so you're the lone guy, huh? And I was like, yeah. He goes, you're pretty good at him? And I'm like, no. And he goes, good. He goes, let's talk about writing loans. Come here. So we sit down and he's going through all this stuff. And he just was a nice guy, but he was no nonsense. I met every time his wife came in, we always shot the breeze. She's a sweetheart. And but I always had the look like, what are you doing here? Always. It was just weird. And I don't know if it was I wasn't good at my job, or I don't know if it was because I was engaging, but I kind of have that face where everybody's like, I think I know you. And I'm like, no, you don't. So once I was out there, a cop came in and it was Butch Tiffany. And he goes, hey, and you want to refi my house? And I go, oh, I'm like, you're a cop. I was like, hey, I'm like, I'd love to go on a ride along. He goes, oh, I'll take you anytime. I was like, oh, awesome. Well, at the same time, I kept going back every weekend to California, trying to cling on to my life.
Things that were comfortable to you.
Yeah. And that was it was a nice 4-hour drive to contemplate my failures, right? Every time, both ways. So, it was different, right? And I know everybody my age was going through a version of that, right? But of course, because it's fine, I'm like, oh, mine's the worst, right? So life sucks. So I'm talking to Butch. I go, yeah, I have a ride along with CHP, but I'll do my ride along with you this weekend if you don't mind. And he goes, yeah, sure. Because I'm on midnight shift. He's got this gravelly voice, smoking cigarettes all the time. Just, 55-year-old dude. And he goes, oh yeah. And so we're talking about my brother in NASCAR and how I just came back from North Carolina. He goes, oh man, look at this. Takes his badge off, turns it around. And Jeff Gordon's signature is on the back of his badge. And he goes, I'm badge number 24. He's my favorite. Look. And he keeps flipping it around. And I go, what a small world. And this, if you ever want anything, let me know. I'll talk to my brother. So my brother always grab stuff for him and stuff and send it to me and I'd give it to him. But I go on a ride along with CHP and it was just, I get this one guy, doesn't talk much, very, very little. It's not his fault. He's a nice guy, but just we would drive, call out his traffic, get out, write his ticket, get inside, look at me, and then we take off. We had no accidents that day. We just wrote tickets, and I'm like, oh, dude, all we did was ruin all these people's days, man. And it sucked. One of my close friends, Todd Kovalets, he's a captain now, and he's like the greatest guy. And we used to joke, we're gonna be like Ponch and John, man. We're gonna be chippies, like we're gonna be the guys. And then I'm like, I hate this job. This sucks. Like I want to kick doors and I want to do what they do on TV, right? So Butch picks me up and goes, hey man, meet me at the PD at 9:00. And I'm like, okay. So I show up, right, in a suit, and it's 120 degrees at night, and I'm in a suit, sweating, every donut and butter product, I'm sweating out of my face, right? And I'm just sitting there, just fat guy out of shape, and he all of a sudden this little he he had the supervisor car at the time, which was a Chevy Impala, the small ones, and it was so hot that because you always leave cop cars running, it had a louvered hood to let some of the heat come out, so it just looked like a Mad Max car. And he goes, "Woo," and he looks through the window and he goes, and he's smoking in the car with no vest on, and he's like, "Hey, get in the car, we got a murder." Puts a cigarette back, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." I get in, right? Both my parents smoked, so, and I hated smoke, right? So I'm like, smoke. I get in, bird, we go tearing off into town, and literally this poor lady had been murdered over a drug debt, and it was just all this real wild setup, right? But we're third, fourth on scene. I'm like, wow, this is wild. And he goes, okay, so we're setting up a crime scene, and we got this, we got that, da 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 da. We call detectives, evidence techs, and just it's a circus. And then he goes, okay, now we got to go handle calls on the streets. Let's go. And we're just out hitting call to call to call to call. Bullhead City in the summertime is pretty wild, really wild. And it's a vacation area where Nevada, Arizona, and California meet. And so you have all this river, big boat, fun stuff. You got casinos on the waterfront in Nevada, and then Arizona, you have a lot of retirement population. Then you have the old river rats, right, that live on the river. And then you have this huge area which is like the biggest trailer park you could imagine, because they're all double wide mobiles, and the way they're set up, the developers try to maximize how much money they could get and just smash them all into this area like Riviera, Holiday Shores. It's affordable to live there. The bad part is that it's kind of like exile. Like if you're too bad for Vegas and you got to leave Vegas because the heat is on you, you go over the river and go there. You're a third striker from California. You can't get your third strike. You're on your second one. You come to Arizona, so that way that law doesn't come into play. And if you need to lay low from Phoenix, you're 4 hours away, so that you're far enough away, right? So you can kind of live in autonomy. So we had this crazy amalgamation of problems there, and that's kind of where you flee society are in towns like that. And then you have this group of people in Bullhead that are awesome people. They're like awesome, normal, everyday people that are in the service industry. They're first responders, they're teachers, they're lawyers. They're all great people, normal people you'd see anywhere in the country. They just have this other side of the coin that's down here. And then you have people that grow up with crazy drug issues, crazy messed up families, crazy, all this wild stuff. So the kind of crime you see there is wild, and it's not unique to there. It's a lot of spots in the United States it's just hyper focused there.
Sure.
And it's right in the 40, so you have huge drug trafficking coming through, so it's kind of like it's like watching cops. So we're handling these calls left and right, and I was like, this is crazy. And I'm in my mind, I'm trying to understand law enforcement from a California aspect, which is totally progressive and forward facing, and then I'm with Butch, and Butch, we're talking to this one guy. He's got tattoos all over his face. Before it was cool, but before rappers made it cool for suburban kids to have face tattoos. This guy was, he was a thug. He had 2 strikes, and he was looking at his 3rd strike, and he had a felony warrant for aggravated assault out of San Bernardino, but it was non-extraditable. So that means that basically California evicted him from California. As long as he wasn't in California, he was good to go. So, but if he went there, he's going to jail for, 15 years. So he's standing in front of us, and he's just giving us lip. And I'm standing kind of far off, and Butch looks at him, and we just had a consensual contact. He's like, oh, I need to talk to that guy. But then there was this point where this guy's talking to him and starts kind of like posturing, but he wanted his ID. And he was like, I'm not giving you anything. I know my rights. I this, I that. And started then leaning into him. You want my ID? It's going to cost you. It's going to cost you a black eye. It's going to cost you this. And Butch goes, take your ID out of your pocket. And he goes, yes, sir. Hands it to him. He goes, owns him and finds all this bad stuff out, right? And he goes, well, luckily none of it's non-extraditable. He goes, the next time that you talk to an Arizona, and he didn't say police officer, he said an Arizona lawman, he goes, you respect him. This isn't California. You remember that. And I watched that dude change. Now, mind you, it's 3 a.m. in the hood, right? And that was normal. And guess what? Handed the dude his ID back, said, you go on your way, you be on your best behavior. And he goes, well, okay. Now, obviously that guy's coming from a drug house, going to another. didn't shake him down and arrest him, didn't anything. But it was so weird to see that what happens in movies is real. That
Be careful
happens.
what you wish for after that first
Yeah.
ride along.
Oh, I went, oh my God, I gotta work here. This is amazing.
That
It
was a
was
turning point.
instantly, because the excitement of playing in big stadiums, the excitement of having 3,000 people watch you play football, the excitement of wrestling at a high level, like it was awesome. It was awesome, and it's such a letdown. You know what I mean? Because you're not important anymore. And I was like, oh my God, I want to do this. And so, that's what brought me into law enforcement there. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then, but there's a piece of me that still wanted to be in California. Like, well, if I'm out here, I didn't make it. If I go back to California, I made it, right? I had
Mhm.
friends into law enforcement in California. So I was like, oh, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. So I didn't put in my application, and my mom filled it out without me knowing, my whole entire packet, and sent it in. And she goes, hey, I applied for you. And I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? I'm an adult. And she goes, you need to be here. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, how embarrassing. So literally Butch shows up a few days after that and goes, hey, your mom dropped off your application for you. He goes, you in or what? And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like, this is actually happening. And the beginning of law enforcement for me was more like Super Troopers, man. I mean, it was like if Super Troopers in Training Day had a baby, it was like that, because it was just unreal. And that's how I ended up there. And it was by accident, but it was guided.
Yeah. And just goes to show again how impactful parents can be outside of high school. Once you hit that, technically quote unquote adulthood when you're 18 or whatever, shows too, there's still just so much that a parent can do. And it sounds like both of your parents were a huge support system with that. Was your dad also reinforcing her, like, get that application in?
Yeah, but my dad was very, very low key and chill, and just, what's supposed to happen is supposed to happen. My
What do you
dad
think
was,
it was that it drove your mom to that point of like, okay, I'm just going to write it for him and turn it in?
I think my mom saw that I was stuck. So my mom, dealing with mental health, she's been through a lot. I mean, not to put all of her business out in the street. She's been, through a lot. And sometimes that rubs off. Anxiety, other type of mental health issues. You don't put two people with the same mental health issue in the same room, because it exacerbates it, right? So I saw that transfer of anxiety, transfer of just that turmoil in my family. And I was
Mhm.
like, I can't have that. I can't function that way. And partially because growing up, I had a lot of just little weird things, like never slept well, always had terrible dreams, like just a lot of weird stuff on top of witnessing my mom go through those things. So I think she always looked at me as being more like my dad, right? To this day. And I mean, I love my mom. She's awesome. But when my dad passed away, we thought she was going to go hours after him. Like, they can't live without each other. It was them versus the world.
Yeah.
So, my voice sounds like him. I look like him, and it's too much for her sometimes. She's like, can I talk to you later? I'm like, yeah, I don't get it. Me and my little brother look quite a bit alike, but I think my demeanors are a lot more like my dad, and it bums her out. It depresses her. So, and that's hard for me, because I'm like, I don't get to talk to my mom, because I'm too much like my dad, right?
Mm.
So it's a rough thing to deal with. But she used to always say, like, oh, you were the only one that we wanted. You were the golden child. The first two, right, were trial and error. And then my little brother was the oops, right? And I mean, they never treated us like that. They invested in me, in better schools. They invested in me for these things. So they had these big aspirations. My dad was like,
Mhm.
oh, be in the FBI. You're going to be an astronaut. You're going to be a stellar athlete. All their aspirations sat on me, and I felt that weight.
Mhm.
And that when I screwed up, I also felt that, like, you're the golden child. You're the one we better not.
And do you
What do
think
you
that was your inner voice think thinking that's what they were portraying onto you?
no? They said that. Oh yeah. If I made a few big mistakes, and they were like, "What are you doing?"
Mm.
And I was young. I was probably 13, 14, and they were just like, "What do you like? No, no, no. We have plans for you. You have to do something." And so they were good at kind of implanting that
They call you out, but also set the expectations.
Yeah, but for me, I was like, oh, dude, the guilt and the shame that you shoulder from that as a kid is a lot. And the bad part is like, when you teach something, there's always holes. People think, oh, these lessons are information dense, right? It's a brick. It's not a brick, it's a sponge, right? So there's little pieces that you don't have time to give everybody the full understanding of it. So this big sea sponge, has these huge holes that you have to fill in over time to make it dense. And I was too young. I was getting handed sponges, and in those holes, I would feel these weird feelings like shame and disappointment to a crazy level just because they didn't have time to follow up with a conversation. And I don't blame them. That's just what happens. So parenting now, like when my kids do something, I give it a second. So I'm not emotional. I talk to them, and then we follow up and we talk about it again, and we follow up, and the follow up is important because like, I remember the information drop and then leave.
Mm.
All the emotions that followed around it, sometimes that'll drive some really crappy things. And I just don't want kids to do that. And I don't think it was a parenting issue. I think it was just the circumstance of the time.
Yeah.
And that was, definitely a factor.
Yeah. So your mom put in the application. You were like, okay, well, here we are. And you went to the academy, got through that. How many years did you spend as a police officer in Arizona? And how did it go? I don't know how it works as far as moving up in the system, whether you transition into the narcotics division or investigator to SWAT team. How did that progress over your time?
So I was a cop for about 7.5, 8 years. And I started out on patrol like everybody does, and then I became a field training officer, and then I was training trainees. Nick Sessions, who really took me under my wing, he was going through all these cool special units, doing all these different things, and detectives, and he was cultivating us younger guys to backfill all the people that were coming up. And so, he was like, hey, I think you should put in for SWAT. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was in such horrible shape when I started law enforcement. Like when I started law enforcement, I ran my Coopers, and it was 1.5 miles, and in 14 minutes, that's a walk. And I ran it in like 2 seconds in time, and I threw up. That tells you how I was so bad. I was such a mess. All of us were, and we did it in like 100-degree heat, which wasn't bad because it's a dry heat. Like looking back, I'm like, oh my God, I was so soft. It was so bad. Terrible. I was bound for diabetes. And then when I got done with my probation and then became a training officer, I was training guys, and I really wanted to be on this one shift with the heavy hitters, right? And that was B-side Graves. That's where guys went to chase monsters. And some of my best friends are still to this day are from that shift. I still talk to them all the time. And they were, to me, they were the rock stars, right? They weren't my mentors, but they were my rock stars. Like I looked at them as like my heroes because they did wild stuff, like chasing, car chases where guys were jumping their cars into the water, like Boduke, into the river, and just wild stuff, right? Like it was crazy. And I'm like, I got to be on that shift. Ended up getting to that shift and then working for Sergeant Messina. And Sergeant Messina was a great mentor. He was a really good leader. And him and Nick were very similar because they both kind of had these East Coast vibes about them, but they were just good dudes. They were good dudes, and they were hard nosed, and they were like, you're going to learn this lesson hard, and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. You're going to suffer a little bit, but that's okay. It's better to hurt than it is to hurt your family with pay. This is going to hurt you type thing, So we learned hard lessons on that shift, and we were like a big dysfunctional family. It was pretty cool. And then Nick was like, hey man, put in for SWAT. I'm like, I don't know if I'm physically good enough, man. Because a lot of the guys on B Graves were on SWAT almost the whole shift, but that's where I wanted to be. So I'm like, okay, let's go. So I put in, and then I went through SWAT basic, and I did really well. And during SWAT basic, I really saw some people that I thought I knew change during a selection process. And I was like, wow, okay. So now I saw the teamwork stuff that came from Coach P and Coach Meek on this end really feed what got me on the SWAT team. And it was like, hey man, like we're all on this boat. If you don't do your job and this boat sinks, we all sink together. So if someone isn't doing their job, you help them. You don't throw them off the boat. It was weird because as we're going through that, I was like, hey guys, so like we're going through the selection for the next 2 weeks. Like let's set a steady date and we all go. Well, they're only choosing 3 people and there's 8 of us. Let's all 8 go here. All of us, because you know what? I don't care who gets chosen as long as the best guys get chosen. I don't care if I'm not the best guy. I don't want to be on the team. And that was not a shared, sentiment. Pretty much 6 of us did it and everyone else is like, nah, I think I'm going to do pretty good. I'm going to study on my own. I'm going to do stuff on my own. And then they tried to like pull people from the group because they wanted to ensure their SWAT. And so I was like, damn, man, I didn't know that these people were like that. That's weird. But I'm glad that happened because they didn't get on the team. I got on the team. A couple other guys got on the team. Actually, it was myself and David Cornelson. And guy's a hammer, man. He was such a great cop. I mean, he's been in 2 shootings. He's been through a wild career. He just retired. I mean, guy's a freaking hero. He's awesome. And he's been through bugs. He was in the Navy. He's a tough dude. And just a hard dude. I mean, if you're going to bet on a guy, that's the guy you bet on. Him and I got it. Wow. I was like, not saying we're on the same level. No, but I got to be in the same class as him. So I'm like, man, this is an honor to be with that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So we get to the SWAT team and I go through my time on the SWAT team, learning a lot. And, you know, it was an adjustment. And then I remember at the beginning, most guys get put on perimeter and I got put on point because I'm short and I'm wide. And they were like, hey, when you're point, you don't stop. And we didn't run a shield. So they're like, you don't stop. And I was like, okay. And I was so afraid of, not afraid, but I was like worried, like, oh my God, will I ever like actually shoot my gun if I need to shoot my gun? Like, I was thinking like a kid because I'm a kid. And so they put me on point. We ran this mission where this drug dealer had 2 vicious dogs that are bit and hurt people real bad. And it was a 170-pound Rottweiler and a 120-pound pit bull. And they were so vicious that animal control couldn't get them. They were like, we can't get near the house. Well, he used them. So that way when people would come buy drugs, they would keep the cops away and keep everybody away and keep other people that were going to rob them away. So, we hit this place, it's cold. And of course I'm sitting on the bus and I'm like, okay, well, just like in training. And I look down and we use these EOTechs, these sights, these holographic sights. And our department made a lot of dumb decisions on purchasing. And we used these N batteries. They're like really short they look like a AA, but they're short. The worst batteries for optics. They just run out all the time. They're severely underpowered, but we got a deal on them. So I'm sitting on the bus and I'm like, oh my God, this is my first mission that I'm on point and I'm new on the team and I'm worried about these dogs. And I'm like, as soon as we get in, I'm gonna have to shoot these dogs. And, well, I don't want to get bit by the dogs and this guy's armed. So I'm like, oh, here we go. So I remember we get in and it's a cold night and we're throwing DDs right as we're approaching. Well, first we get off the bus and my sight, right? I look down and my sight's blinking and I go, of course, my first mission, my sight goes back. So I flip my iron sights up and it's dark. It's a nighttime no knock. I get off the bus. And as we get off the bus, I put my big sight up, my big ring. And I'm like, God, I hope I can see. Oh man, this stuff's going through my head. And then we're throwing DDs. This place looks like Beirut, boom, 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 because we want these dogs to run away. So we just do the mission and there's no dogs. And I was like, shit. And it's a single wide mobile. So everything's tight. So I'm like, oh, here we go, man. And so we get to the door and then our preacher hits the door, boom. And all I see is eyes and teeth in that brown snout of a big old dog. And I go, oh no. And I remember a DD came flying over my head and it goes off as I shot the first dog. And then I stepped on it and I'm looking at the other dog. The other dog's running between me and my point cover, right? Running between us. And I'm like, oh man, I'm going to get bit right in the back of the leg. Oh man. And then I remember just as soon as we make it into the kitchen, he comes walking out of the bedroom and he has a benzene torch because he was smoking meth which has a chrome, barrel and a big green tank in his hand. And he walks out like this and I went click and I took my safety off and he just crumbled. He was like, oh, because he had no idea what was going on. And then I went, whoa. And then we hooked him up and we did our thing. And I was like, oh my God, between shooting that dog in 2 seconds, I put my dust cover back up, put it back on safe. All this stuff happened automatically. Both shots hit the dog right here. It died with its eyes open, and no one knew I shot the dog. They just saw the dog laying like this because it didn't even bleed. And it was so big when I stepped on it, my helmet hit the light fixture. And it was a huge dog. And so I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. And here I'm just I'm a kid in my 20s with no combat experience, of no nothing, no this or that. And it just all happened. And then the assistant team leader walks up and he has my two shell casings. And he goes, "You might want to keep those." All right. And then we start processing the scene. And I was like, what a wild night. Like, this was crazy. It just all happened so fast and slowed down and nobody got hurt. Right. I mean, poor dog was doing what he was supposed to do, but it was the first thing that I had ever shot. Right. And I didn't realize, like, this stuff happens fast and the adjustments and this is not a sport. This is important. And I'm really glad that happened in the beginning, because as time went on and I had more stuff that had to do with people and shootings and this and that stuff, it was easier to make the right decision in short periods of time. No matter where I was, it made sense. And I was doing a lot of growing up, and Nick was like mentoring me, like, "Hey man, it's just a dog. It's just a dog, man. And this is normal." He goes, "Someday it's going to be people. Someday it's going to be a person or people."
Well, and that's
And
what I was thinking, Roland. When you started off just even explaining this, I kept thinking, "Ooh, what a mental shift that you have to make, knowing that you're still ultimately going in, the target is a person." I mean, there's
yeah,
a criminal that's the reason that you're going in, but to have that mental shift and first be thinking, "Oh, I need to be cautious of a dog." Me as a
no,
civilian, I don't think about those other outside things. And I don't know if you grew up with dogs, but
love dogs.
we
Yeah.
romanticize this idea of like dogs and pets, and then having as a young 20-year-old to be like, okay, my first kill is going to be a dog. And if
Yeah.
I don't fulfill this, I could put myself in danger as well as my team. What a weird thing to conceptualize in my mind. I'm like, whoo, that's a lot to process going
And it happened
into this.
like this.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and I think they probably also did this as a reason. That was probably a great merge into it. And I'm sure you've had hundreds of experiences after that where, what do you say, under tension?
Time
And
under
I
two.
think that's just another thing and a circumstance where talk about a job that's high pressure and has a lot of tension in there. And you have to be quick and react to what's given to you and have to kind of trust in your training and your abilities.
I mean, it really was a non-issue. And it's just, dealing with a dog. It was no big deal. So Nick was he knew that there was probably a low chance that we were going to have to engage this guy. This guy was going to shoot it out with us. Right. Not always the case, but I'm going to put this young guy in front probably sooner than I should to deal with the stress. I'm going to see what he does. And I'm going to give the problem of, if you screw this up, you're going to get mauled by a dog. You know what I mean? Right. And hey, that's fine. It's not like you're going to die. Somebody else will shoot the dog. But now I see how mindful he was with all this stuff. I mean, to the point where after a certain amount of time, then he goes, "Hey, you need to put in for narcs." And I go, "Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, let's do it." And the next thing you know, we are,
So
managing.
you're doing that for both. Like you can be part of the SWAT team and
Yes.
okay.
So my assignment goes from patrol to narcotics detective. And then I'm called out on the
SWAT missions.
most of the time
Okay.
I'm writing the search warrants that we're getting called out on, which is really cool. So, and we had other guys that our whole narcotics division was guys on the SWAT team. So it really worked hand in hand. And for a part-time team, I mean, to put it in perspective, our narcotics unit, we won Arizona Narcotics, ANOA, Arizona Narcotics Officers Association unit of the year. And we beat out, I mean, everybody in Arizona, people from Phoenix and the Super Sacs, right? Like, because we wrote 200 search warrants in 1 year. I mean, that's wild for a team of 4 dudes to do. Now, a lot of those search warrants were vehicle search warrants. Like after the fact stuff, they would call us in and we write a search warrant into the vehicle and then toss the vehicle, stuff like that. There was a bunch of those, but we hit a ton of houses. We did a ton of trips. We did a ton of buy walks. We did a ton of buy bus. We worked with so many people, and my supervisor at the time, I couldn't stand him, but I actually love him to death now. But he taught me how to work hard. I slept 4 hours a night, max. 7 days a week. We were nonstop, and we were all over the place. And so Nick knew I needed to work with him. Like, great, you stick me with a guy that's got a glandular problem, right? That like can't sleep, and now I'm working with a friggin' vampire, right? Here we go. And I didn't do a ton of undercover work, but I did a little bit, and I was terrible at it. I was so bad at it, and I was around guys that were good. I mean, my buddy Brandon, I mean, that guy, I don't know if he had a horseshoe up his butt or whatever, but he just couldn't do anything without finding a pound of meth, or he'd run an informant and just, they'd hit this huge. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, like if I wrote a search warrant, I'd find a couple ounces. If he wrote a search warrant, we'd find, a ton of money and then a giant shrine to La Muerta, right? And then all of our pictures would go to, a dude doing a documentary on it. I'm like, dude, that's amazing, right? He was so good, but it was so cool to be around those guys. And that's what started me in jiu-jitsu is I was like, you know what? I'm going to get killed buying drugs undercover because I suck at this. I'm so bad at it. I can't. I need to be able to defend myself. I can't carry a gun while I'm wearing board shorts and a tank top. I can't, in as far as like edged weapon stuff, right? Like anybody who tells you, oh yeah, carry a folding knife, man, get out of town. Like most people that teach knife stuff they live in a theoretical world. You know what I mean? So like, I just didn't have the training I needed for the edged weapon stuff I wish I would have known the guys I know now, right? I wish I would have known Belton,
Mhm.
hey, like, how do you think I should carry this? Or Gary Drake, Gary, how do you think I should be doing this? And merge those two guys.
Knowledge or background.
Yeah,
Mm.
right. That would have helped a lot back then. But back then, the only guy I had trained with was Brom Frank at a seminar. And then there was a guy that trained for Emerson. I just had like a little taste of it, but nothing I would bet my life on. And I was a rough, football player. I needed something that made sense. We all got together and started. There was a handful of us from different units that were like, hey, let's go to Mojave Valley Boxing Club and we'll watch these tapes and we'll train. Oh yeah, okay, let's do that. They had a cage in there, so we go in there and we were hurting each other. We have no idea what we're doing. And then one day Rick walks in, my professor,
Mm.
and he walks in and he puts on his gi and ties his belt. And he goes, "Hey, who's teaching class?" And we're like, "Dude, you are. We have no idea what we're doing. We're hurting each other. We need your help." And he goes, "Okay." And then so he starts teaching.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't know how that all connected.
He just walked in. It was the weirdest thing. It would be like if I was like, I think I'm going to start playing guitar. Like, I bought this guitar. I don't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden into that coffee shop walks in BB King. He goes, "Hey buddy, what are you doing?" I just thought I'd come in and grab a cup of coffee. You need some help? Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. So he just walked in and Rick did not want to teach us. He was like, "Look, man," he's like, "I just retired from fighting. I retired from teaching. I'm done. I'm just out here." Little did I know he was kind of hiding out too. We told him, "You have to teach us. You have to." And
Yeah.
then that changed everything. That was everything.
So explain, because you trained in many different arts between BJJ, judo, wrestling, sambo, kickboxing, muay do, is that how you
Yeah.
say it? And then kenpo. At this point, because you've already said that you did wrestling in high school, where did all the other practices come into play? Because is this right when you were introduced to BJJ? Had you had done any other
All that
martial
I'd
arts?
already done. Yeah.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, my parents put me into we actually lived in Fullerton and my parents were like, "Oh, we're gonna sign him up for karate." So, it was like the height of like the Karate Kid and all that stuff. And
Mm.
this guy, Tiger Yang on the name, he has this created Muay-Do, which was like a Hapkido Taekwondo hybrid. And it was more self-defense and not tournament fighting. And he was in the 70s, there was a show called That's Incredible. And he was on it all the time. He was like, "Oh, I'm going to pull a jumbo jet with my teeth." And he'd, have he'd have no shirt on and his belt and stuff. And he'd sit there and he'd pull a jet liner with his teeth. And everyone's like, "That's incredible." And I'm going to break all these boards. "Oh, that's incredible." He's this Korean dude that's like built like a house, man. Bricked head, big jaw, doorknobs for knuckles, and his patch was a fist with big old giant knuckles because his knuckles look like doorknobs. And it was, he was legit. I mean, he was a legit monster. And it was just so funny. We'd go in there and we'd start doing stuff. And for safety, like we'd start sparring. And I was like, "Oh, nice. We get to spar." And I'd spar with bigger kids and then I'd sweep their legs. And he's like, "No, no, you can't do that." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I'd start getting tuned up by a bigger kid and I can't kick their legs. And I didn't understand why. And then I tackle them. "No, no, you can't do that." And I'm like, so I'm just going to stand here in a match of pugilism. And that didn't interest me at the time.
Mhm.
But I did it for a couple of years. I really liked it. I liked the forms. It was cool. I really enjoyed it. And I loved wearing a gi. I was like, "Oh, so cool. It's like a ninja," right? I
And
watch
that
a
was
girl.
your first experience, like
My
first.
first experience.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my first experience. I loved it. And then I started American Kempo, like the Ed Parker system, when I was in my early teens. And same thing. I really liked it. I liked it because it was a little more direct and aiming at vitals instead of points. I liked the lack of point sparring. But there was always a point sparring element, and everything else was kind of notional because you can't punch somebody in the throat, full blown punch somebody in the throat. So it's kind of weird. And I was just trying to understand it. And I thought, okay, there's a level of understanding. Once I can get that knowing and float, like I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just, it has to be notional. It's too dangerous, right? But it doesn't necessarily make it more effective. So again, I just kind of fell away from that. But I liked the traditional aspect. I liked all that stuff. And then my dad had me cross train a little bit of judo, so that way it would help me for my wrestling. But I never looked at wrestling like a martial art, which now
Sure.
it's the greatest martial art, the greatest American martial art. Like, of course it is. And now studying, catch wrestling, and catch wrestling turned into folk style wrestling. All right. So the judo and wrestling kind of married together, and that was part of it. Right. But I didn't really like the rules of judo either. And it seemed, I would always go, man, 99% of the guys in judo in my classes were soft. They couldn't take 1 second of wrestling. Like, the wrestlers were just so gritty, so much tougher, and so much stronger, so much more athletic from training really hard. And I'm like, and the judo guys were training hard, but it was the traditional kata, didn't build their strength. Now, you look at how they train in Japan, different. You look at the high level judo clubs, in like San Jose. I mean, yeah, maybe, but I mean, to argue that wrestling isn't the hardest sport there is, I don't think that that's a far claim at all. So wrestling just made more sense. And
And
then,
then when were you dabbling in some of the striking?
so that came during my law enforcement time, and doing kickboxing between the defensive tactics and then working with Rick. And Rick was more of a boxer. And then I would work kickboxing with other officers that were doing Muay Thai and Dutch kickboxing. It was good, but in a traditional sense, I was kind of on an island to where there wasn't any high level anything. And then Rick shows up, and Rick is the high level only thing. Training with Rick, I mean, the first location we had was a Napa auto parts store with 1-inch foam puzzle mats that were old and dingy and disgusting. I have no idea where they got them. And they were flat on the concrete floor, and Rick wouldn't pay for the AC. So the AC was never on, and there was one door and one little sliver window. And if it was 130 outside, it was 150 inside. I mean, it was not accurate, but you know what I mean? And we
Yeah.
had one tree, and, there's a little sidewalk, and there's a tree, and we called it the puke tree. And that tree was like the most luscious, well-fed tree. I mean, it was the only green thing in all of Needles, right? And, Rick lived in Needles, which was on the California side. So I had to drive 50 minutes door to door from my house to his house and then back. So, like, we would train so hard in there. I mean, it was nuts. And he purposely, I think, was trying to get us all to quit. He was like, I don't want to do this. And with the way he trained is we were at his practice. He wasn't teaching us. We were at Rick's practice because I think Rick was always like, I always have one more fight in me. I have one more this, one more that. So he was always still looking to compete.
Yeah.
And I mean,
focused on making himself better.
yeah. And he knew it would help us. It would bring us up too.
Sure.
Like, he set the pace in the room. And I mean, with that kind of mentality, we didn't have a choice to be competent, because if you weren't competent, you got hurt, you were gone, you were out. And it was an interesting way to come up, because when I started jiu-jitsu, I was probably 270. So, like, I got fat again as a narc because I was eating out all the time. I was always working. I wasn't sleeping well. And the week I met my wife is the week that I started jiu-jitsu. So my wife saw it from the beginning to the end. And I mean, when I met my wife, my hair was long, and long curly hair, big long beard. I mean, I looked terrible. I looked like Hagrid. You know what I mean? Like, not far off now, but I mean, saying, like, I just looked terrible. And I think it was better for us to meet each other when we were probably, at our beginning points, because we grew together. And I mean, my wife she's always been beautiful and great looking, but I was not. So, and she's always been strong and tough. I don't feel like I was at that point. And I still, I mean, even to this day, I don't think now, but stronger. And so she's kind of seen the full, like, what jiu-jitsu has done and how it's kind of echoed through everything I do.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's just what I understand. Some people, people can use a lot of things to improve their lives. Maybe I just don't, resonate with those. I resonate with this.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that seeing Rick live his life kind of out loud, it was something I'd never seen before. I mean,
Yeah.
like his life is very much like, like Street Fighter, like literally just wandering the world looking for a fight. Like, I want to know who's the best. He literally is that guy. Like, literally is that guy. And it's so funny. Like, it doesn't make you millions of dollars. It doesn't really make you a whole lot of friends. It's what he did, and watching him do that, and now watching him transition to like this elder figure with knowledge and wisdom through the hard trials and tribulations he's been through. He's really impacted so many people's lives, and so many people are different people now because of him, not because he intended to do that to them or for them, but because it was just the rub. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, you live with wolves, like, hey, you're born different, you're raised different. And
Yeah.
so, Rick has, he just lived it the way he wanted to live it. And the nice thing is he didn't have anybody telling him how to do it when he was with us. So I think it was kind of his clearest expression of that. He wasn't teaching at another academy. He didn't have 4 other black belts that were influencing him. Like, he was already a 4th-degree black belt when I met him. So you could go into a lot of gyms, and if you saw a black belt at that time, like, 2004, 2005, it was a big deal. You're like, oh, dude, that's a
Right.
black belt. Whoa. Like, I mean, I can't tell you how many tournaments I went, and the top competing people were purple belts. Like, rare to see a black belt. Rick's a 4th degree. So I'm like, this is crazy. You just walked in. Nuts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we just trained super, super hard, and he didn't have anyone telling him like, hey, maybe you should take it easy on these guys. Hey, maybe you should this. Hey,
Yeah.
this isn't business, because it wasn't a business. So, like, consequences were real there. Like, people got
Yeah.
hurt. Yeah, oh, yeah. People got hurt bad. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite aha moment from that early training that really just hooked you for good? And when you thought, yeah, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing? Or was that later? I mean, was this still down the road that you thought, no, I'm going to pursue this now? Or did you start to get an itch where you're like, okay, I think this is something that I might be interested in?
No, it was a decision. And it was during my blue belt test. And I mean, it was kind of a series of decisions, but the first decision was, once I started doing this, I'd quit so many things in my life. I felt like a failure, like an utter failure. Like, anything good I had ever done in my life had been erased tenfold. I mean, just complete failure. And I felt like I quit everything. Everything I quit. I quit, football. I quit all my other sports. I quit my jobs. I quit. Every time something good came in front of me, I got scared, self-sabotaged, and quit. And I just felt like a quitter. I never felt like a quitter in my life. And my dad had always told me, don't you ever quit anything. Like, if we started a season, we had to finish. And, I mean, I remember thinking back to when I was like a 6-year-old sitting on the stairs, and I'm like, I don't want to go to football practice. And I was crying. And my dad's like, you're going to get up and you're going to go to practice. And it's not going to be a good practice. You're going to hate it, and it's going to hurt, but you have to go, because we don't quit. And man, I pleaded with him, knowing that from that moment, that was the expectation. And now, as an adult, I had basically been a quitter. Like, I totally went against everything that my dad ever set as an expectation. And I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm lying to him. And at the time, my parents, they owned a house and they had an apartment underneath, and I rented the apartment from them underneath them. When I first moved out to Bullhead. So, like, I was around my dad all the time. Like, my dad was my buddy. We were always hanging out. My night shift, we would always, like, we called my house the substation, because it was right in the middle of town and it overlooked the river. So everybody would stop by, and my dad, we stayed up late. So my dad would sit there and make food for everybody. Hey guys, you want a burrito? All right, I got it for you. Hey, Mr. Gutierrez. Hey, he was like, it was awesome. He was like the auxiliary. It was awesome. So, there'd be 5 cop cars in front of my house, in the middle of the night, and then just Grand Central Station. And I felt like I let him down. And so when I started doing jiu-jitsu, I was like, this is something I will never stop doing. And I was like, I will do this until the day I die. That was the first decision after a few months of jiu-jitsu, because I knew how hard it was. And I'm like, oh, I'll probably never get any good at it, but I'm never going to stop doing this, because I need this. And then in my blue belt, I remember I was taking my blue belt test, and I literally, there was moments where it was just the hardest thing I'd ever done. And I mean, buddies that were there that were already purple belts, and like they had joined Rick as purple belts or as blue belts, and they were watching it and they were like, they're used to this stuff. So they're like, oh, this fat guy's hurting over here. It's nothing. I wasn't doing anything impressive. I was just surviving. And I literally had to make a decision. I was like, I'm willing to die doing this. Like, I'm willing to die doing this. Like, I'm not quitting. So, uh, making that decision, like I'll die on this mat. And I didn't. And I was like, oh, you won't die. Oh, okay. Oh, I have more in the tank. I have more. Okay. And not like I just got up and started doing more, but I was like, no, I'm going to survive. I found another gear of grit. And then I was like, okay, so this is the process forever, forever. Go to the deep end forever. Stop sitting in the shallow end. Stop making excuses. Stop giving yourself an excuse to be, here's all my excuses why I'm being victimized by the world or by my situation or by my, absolutely not. I will go forward and never stop. And that was the decision that happened then. And I was like, whew, okay. And then, now looking back, it was that process, that first, year and a half of jiu-jitsu I was there 3 days a week. It was the hardest 2.5, like our practices were 2 hours to 2.5 hours. And Rick would say, oh yeah, they're, practice is hour and a half. And then we're there for 2.5 hours. He just didn't stop practice and nobody left. And, there'd be a cloud. It was like a wrestling room. It was miserable. And Jonna was the only person that would sit out through the whole thing. She would sit there and watch. And she would sit on this bench that Rick made. Rick goes, I don't want anybody to feel comfortable sitting in here watching because there wasn't a lot of space. And it was a 2x4 and a 2x4. And so this thing would like almost fall over. It was more of like a balance device than it was. Jonna would sit through the whole thing and her hair would get all frizzy and she'd start sweating through the whole, it was like being in a sauna. And she would just sit there and watch. And so I think it was more impressive for her to be present for all these years, to go through all these, the evolution of, Rick's different locations of gyms, and none of them are easy. He left from that one to Tri-State Grappling. And then we ended up at the Kill House, which was a old cement factory that, had those metal building in the middle of the desert. And there's no running water, no AC, like be 120 degrees outside we'd roll the doors up, rattlesnakes and scorpions would walk on the mat. He'd walk over, pick them up, throw them outside. Yeah. And when people hear that, they're like, yeah, okay, you walked to school uphill both ways in the snow. And I'm like, no, that was real.
And so they're still training in that facility today?
No. So they moved from that. So they had what's called a microburst. It's like a tornado and it crushed it. So they had moved to because it was on tribal land. So the tribe gives Rick a place for his gym. So they own a casino and they have a building that's on the side of the rodeo grounds. And it's a really nice ballroom. It's kind of cool. It looks very John Wick. It has like a hammered tin ceiling and chandeliers, and it's all matted out and they have a cage in there.
Well,
yeah. So it's pretty cool. It's something to see, but, it's always something to train there. It's something different. Like you feel different. And it's something that, not that I've tried to emulate, but atmospherically, if you don't have, austere conditions, you don't want that to be a factor in how good you fight. Like that's a bad thing if you're only good at room temperature. So yeah, so we've always kept rooms hot. It's also good for flexibility, things like that, but and injury prevention. But once you kind of realize like you're not really breathing air, you're having that moment where like, what's his name? Lawrence Fishburne walks up to you and he's like, hey, do you think that's air you're breathing? You're like, oh, yeah, got it. Okay. Okay. And it's amazing what you can really teach yourself to do. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, and so you started training with Rick and the guys once you were really involved in that martial arts training. How did that influence your approach at work when you were still experiencing some of these high stress situations? Do you feel like you noticed a shift or?
Huge shift. So the biggest thing, and I found this out later, but the biggest thing I knew right up front was my confidence with violence. And so I stayed calmer, and it was technique in between. And then at the end I was starting to get closer to my blue belt. I got in way better shape. I was down to 215 pounds. Wasn't lifting weights, but I was like building more muscle. I felt like my composition was better. My overall health was better. I was thinking clearer. I was calmer, and I was coming home in a better state of mind. So my relationship was really good with Jonna. And Jonna, I have two stepchildren. So, and I've raised them like they're my own. They've lived with us full time the whole time. So, I went from being, a single guy to having to be a dad right now, with dad responsibilities. And I loved it. It was awesome. But it was an adjustment. And there was a point where providing for them, I have to provide. Like this is a thing. And so I had an opportunity. One of the guys on the SWAT team, he was a ranger, and he goes, man, I can't take another pay cut at this police department, because we were having pay cuts, and I think I was making like $19 an hour or $20 an hour. And he goes, hey, there's this company, Triple Canopy. They're looking for guys to protect diplomats overseas. And with your tactical experience and your jiu-jitsu, I really think that'll help out. And I'm like, dude, nobody cares about jiu-jitsu. I said, it's like saying I'm really good at tennis. Like nobody cares. And this, dude, I don't know. And my brain, I was just so tunnel visioned on like, yeah, I'm going to be a cop. I'm going to work my 25 years. I'm going to go into the drops, work another 5 years, and I'll have this. And I had my whole life planned out in that town. And that's a hard police department, because that police department retires you. You don't retire from that police department. Most people either die while they work there, or they're dead within, 5 years. Very few have transitioned out well, because it's such a fun place to be a cop and such a wild place to be a cop. It just becomes your identity. So once that's over with, you just, and you kill your body while you're working there, because it's just so unhealthy. And it's a different place. And when I got that offer, I just got my I'd been a blue belt actually for a little while. And I said, oh, well, I'll think about it. And I went on a SWAT mission where we wrote the warrant, and somebody checked the DOC records, and apparently 3 of them were in DOC, and they were the ones we were worried about. They're like wanted, like they'd done time for murder, aggravated assault, like murder 3, all different kinds of things. There were problems. There were bad people. And even the grandmother was a dope slinger, and she's old, she's old, wrinkled. And it was only supposed to be the mom and the grandmother that were supposed to be there. And so we hit the door and, early in the morning, but we had to wait just as day breaks, so that way it wasn't a nighttime, no knock. So we started announcing, we get there, and it turns out there's 7 people in that house. All 3 of those, the bad brothers were there. And usually, like if you were to serve a warrant on a house, it would take, 35 seconds to call code 4, like, hey, everything's secure, right? It took us 2.5 minutes, almost 3 minutes, because we were in like fights, just fight. Every room we were fighting with somebody, and they were actively fighting with us. And then there's a pit bull running through. So my perspective, we get in the house, and I end up over here, and I end up get my hands on the grandmother. Oh man, I get her in cuffs, and she's running up the wall as I'm holding on to her hands, and she's pushing against me. And then all of a sudden I'm getting wet. I'm like, why am I getting wet? What is happening? Like, ma'am, stop, lady, stop. Come on. Cause she's old. I don't want to be mean to her, but at the same time, actively fighting. She's high as a kite on meth, crazy, 60-year-old, like a cat. And then all of a sudden I feel zaps, and I'm like, what in the hell? And I look down, and I have taser wires falling over my calves, and this 100-pound pit bull's peeing all over the place. And I'm like, what is going on? And everyone's screaming. I'm like, dude, this is chaos. I get to this position, and then somebody starts popping into the room, and I go, oh my God, I pull my taser out, and I'm pointing at him, getting ready to tase him. And then he dives out into a hallway, and I'm like, we don't have enough people to secure all these people. This should have been a SWAT mission. This should have been this, but we have 5 guys entering in, and we're outnumbered, So all this stuff happens. It takes us 2 minutes to get everybody in zip cuffs. And then I'm walking the grandmother out, because I'm like, I have to separate her. She's old. I don't want her to, once her adrenaline comes out, I don't want her to tank, right? She is the meanest, sourest lady. I'm like, oh, this is just terrible, right? And in Bullhead City, there's parts of the town that's like moon sand, right? It's like when it rains, and it's like powder, like talcum powder, and they live in that area. And I go walking over, I'm walking her out, and it's raining, monsooning, so it's hot and it's wet, and I'm walking through, and just mud's climbing up my legs, and I'm putting her in a patrol car, and I'm covered in dog pee, and I'm all zapped up, right? And she popped me in the face. I put her in the car, and I closed the door, and I said, hey, you're going to calm down? And she's like, She's just cursing at me up a storm, right? And I didn't buckle her in like an idiot. And I'm like, I just close the door and I'm like, oh, I turn around. And then she leaned on the seat, both feet, boom, and kicks the cage, and the cage breaks the window. And I feel the glass hit the back of my vest. And I went, I made $28 for this. I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. This is
Breaking point.
crazy. I'm putting that packet in tonight. So I put the packet in. They get me out there, and then like I was a DT instructor for Arizona Post too. So I was trying to get jiu-jitsu pushed in there, and I was told so many times that jiu-jitsu wasn't going to work, right? So and it just was not good for our stuff. So when I went to this training with Triple Canopy, they were like, yeah, come on out. You know, they're like, we're going to need you for a few months, like 2 months. And I was like, I don't have 2 months of vacation. And so I went to the chief and I said, hey, you know, like I'm going to go here. I might get a job and I might leave. I'm being straightforward with you. I said, but if I'm really going to get cut, because I'm not like a special forces guy. I'm not that guy. So I'm going to get as much training as I can, and I'll bring it back to the SWAT team. So I'll treat it like a long-term training. So can I take a sabbatical and take time off? Because they'll pay me to be there. And they were like, yeah. And so my chief at the time, Rodney Head, was the best chief I ever worked for, man. He was awesome. He knew, like, no, this is how you get out. Like, you get out. And he's like, yeah. He goes, I got you. It's no problem. Take your time. Do what you need to do. You have a job here when you're done. I said, okay. I was like, wow. And I'm in my mind, like, oh, he fell for it. Yes. No, he knew that.
He was supporting you through that next process.
He knew I had an aptitude. I didn't know I had an aptitude. So I left and I went, and it was kind of a shock because the first day they go, hey, we're going to front load. We front load these trainings with the things that people fail the most. And it wasn't a training. It was a vetting. So like, we need to see that you're proficient in these things. If you're not, you go. We're not here to train you. And I was like, oh, okay. And all these guys are military guys. And I was never in the military. So in my mind, I'm like, dude, you guys are all like Delta Force ninjas, man. Like, I'll never compare to a military guy. We had a lot of combat vets in there. In that class, we didn't have a bunch of small group guys. We had a couple dudes that were SF, and I think we had one MARSOC guy maybe, but the rest of them were infantry guys that had trigger time, you know, and they had a lot of deployment. So they were solid dudes, but they were swinging up too. I didn't know. I thought they were like, this was like common practice. So we were all swinging up, except for the small group guys. This was, you know, all day for them. And so we start first day, you know, shooting. We get in there, get all of our kits laid out, and, you know, go put your kit on, pistols. We get up to the line. Okay. You know, load, make ready, boom. All right. And the instructors all give their brief and they go, okay, so we're going to start out, and, you know, this is the course of fire. And I was like, okay. I'm like, all right, this is real. And they were like, you have to pass this qual. And it wasn't a hard qual, but I didn't realize that most infantrymen don't shoot pistol hardly at all. They don't train with pistol. They're all riflemen. So that's why they put the pistol first, so they can weed those guys out. And then it was pistol, rifle, machine guns, stuff like that. I had never shot machine gun belt feds. I had to learn it the night before. Luckily, everybody was helping me, and I learned in that environment how to learn. Right, you have to always be looking for work. Right, don't be standing around with your hands in your pockets. Help whoever needs help them, right? And be a teammate, you know what I mean? Don't be a guy that's trying to make themselves look good, make the team look good. So it fit right into, you know, what I was used to. So I was like, okay, let's do this. And then, you know, cops shoot with pistols a lot. So at the 25-yard line, we shoot, boom, 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 right? We do our first, you know, iteration of fire, and then they have us holster up, like 30 some odd of us, almost 40. And they go, okay, stop. And the instructor starts walking down and he's marking the bullets, right? And then he looks back and he goes, next one, next one, next one, right? And I go, what are they doing? Right? And they gave me a thumbs up because all mine were in the A zone. So I was like, and then I look, and those guys were already off. And a Suburban pulls up. They unload, put their stuff away. They're in a Suburban. They're already going to the airport to leave. They were gone. And that happened through the whole training. I mean, you just all of a sudden, dude, where'd so-and-so go? They just didn't
like Where was this, Roland?
In Zachary, Louisiana.
Okay.
I went to a place called Jestic. And we shared it with the state police, but we had our end with Triple Canopy at the time. It was for Task Order 11, I think. I worked on Task Order 11 and Task Order 9, so I get them mixed up sometimes. But one was Afghanistan, one was Iraq, and then this was for Iraq. And surprisingly, I did pretty well shooting. And then, but I caught the eyes of the instructors, because the instructors were like, "Who's this little fat guy?" Because I wasn't in great shape, and these guys, all our instructors are all SEALs. They're all, SF guys. They're all jacked. They're all jacked, tan, you know what I mean? And just in the prime, service. So these guys train all the time. That's all they do. And no matter what, when you're a cop, you usually have a little extra, because, you're a cop, right? You gotta eat bad food. You're not sleeping. It's the job. And I knew I wasn't impressive looking, and I was a relatively nice guy, long story longer. After that was DT. A lot of guys fail DT because they just don't know how to handle themselves. And I was kind of shocked that was the next thing. And they were like, okay, well, we're going to do defensive tactics, which is kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. And I was like, I've done these things. Perfect. And so they set up a circuit, and I crushed the circuit. And then the instructors were the ones that rolled with us, and they were our role players. And dude, I twisted them all up, and they were like, dude, this little fat guy's a maniac. We love him. Yeah. They were all pumped up. And I was like, oh shit, did I just become their mascot? Like, this is kind of funny. And it was because my blue belt jiu-jitsu was so focused. Rick's jiu-jitsu was so focused on fighting that it fit really well with defensive tactics, because it was judo, wrestling, forward to jiu-jitsu. And that cliff, and progression is common in that kind of work. And they were just like, I'm twisting up the instructors, and they were like, dude, do you do jiu-jitsu? They're like, I'm like, yeah, I do. What's going on? Am I going to get fired now? And they were just like, no, I love this guy. So then all of a sudden I get pushed to a leadership position, and I'm the youngest guy in my class, but they assume I'm older. I grade early. And not in the best shape. So they assumed I was older. So, I get pushed to all these different little teams. I have to lead a team, right? And I don't have any experience in this. So the other teams were helping me. And hey, we're in land nav. I don't know how to shoot a back azimuth. I don't know this stuff. But the night before, we're doing this stuff, and when you're around these people that they're all about rising the tide, whether they're intending to or not, they are. And that element of lifting all the boats around them, because they're the tide. It's such a refreshing place to be, because you actually get stuff done. There's no bullshit. There's no element of deception or this or that. I kind of call it regular people stuff. You work in corporate America, you work in whatever. There's this regular people stuff that people do. It's crap. It's gross.
The politics, the ego,
Yeah.
the drama.
It's gross, and you don't need that. You can absolutely live completely without it.
Mm-hmm.
And bad things will still happen to you. They'll still politic with you, but these guys just didn't do it, because they were 100% mission objective, and they put everything else aside, right? Their opinions, politics, even faith. They were like, hey man, this is what I am, but I'm not going to impose any of this stuff on you, because we got to get the mission done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It was really, really, really impressive to see guys function like that. And I was like, man, these small military dudes are no joke, dude. They really figured this stuff out. And then, when I got overseas, I did a little time. We were spinning up a team. Our principal ended up getting hurt and had his legs blown off before we actually took him from the other team. They had a coffee can explosive under the ground, under a seat, and took his legs off. So that was the guy, and we couldn't take him anymore. So they took our team and dispersed them. And I went through firearms instructor school, because they were like, hey, you shoot pistol pretty well. We're going to put you through this. And it was a course they don't run often. And it's at the time, a very tight, exclusive course. And I took it so serious, I ended up getting top shot in that course, and it was really cool. And I saw how these guys interact with each other, and I was super impressed. I was super impressed. Just at the level of professionalism. So I'm slowly getting the rub of this professionalism and of the process of training. You're a white belt, you sit down, you be quiet, and you soak it all in. And if you know a technique is not exactly the way you learned it before and you think that one's righter, hey, wait till later. The only way you can know if your training is working is you have to try it, let it fail,
Mhm.
work at it a few times, and then you can make your decision later. And that's this how these guys work, man. They were the best students, and so I just tried to be like them and help everybody. They help everybody. They're unreal, like unreal what these guys do. So I'm learning more and more about these guys. And
After this process of the training, the vetting process, do they kind of give you this go ahead? Like, okay, yeah, you made it through, and then what?
so there's a bunch of process, like bio process of like you got to basically tell them like why you deserve to be there. And you know, it's, you know, it's all written stuff that's supposed to satisfy the government because you're contracting for the United States government to protect diplomats in high threat areas, right? So as far as the protection that I had done, protection details, I hadn't really done any protection details as a cop, but I had understood the concept from SWAT school, right? But we hadn't done a governor's detail. We hadn't done this. We'd done some things, but a lot of counter surveillance from being a narcotics detective, all that stuff. So I had to like put all that in a packet, and then they had to clear it. So all that process was going on. When they approved me to do this work, you know, you basically go through all the vetting, and then, you know, that vetting basically checks that box. Okay, so you're ready to hit the ground running once you get over there. So when they sent me, and I made it to Iraq, it was a really interesting experience because, you know, I'd been out of the country once. I'd been to the Netherlands. I went and did a police exchange. I went to the Netherlands to Heerlen, and we went over there for a couple weeks, and then later they came over with us for a couple weeks, and it was a fraternal order police sponsored program, and we just saw how they did business over there, especially with like because our narcotics unit went over there, and it was really quite the experience to go overseas to see how people live in Europe and police in Europe and the culture difference. It was really interesting. I was super young when I went. So when they came to visit us, they were like, "Oh, man, we can't wait to be here." You know, we thought they did stuff very similar tactically, very similar to us. They had cool guns. We had cool guns. And they were like, "No, man, we want to go out, wear cowboy hats and shoot revolvers and be cowboys, man." And we were like, "This is wild. We want to drive big trucks and be American." It was so wild. And we're like, it's just every day here. It's so weird. And over there, it's just different. We thought it was cool, but it's just different. It was very
Mhm.
different. You know, that was my only experience to be out of the country. And then now I show up in BIOP in Iraq, and I fly over on a plane full of contractors.
So you get done through this training. You're in Louisiana. Did you come back home to Jonna and just say,
Yeah, well,
"Hey,
yeah,
it went well. I'm actually not gonna go back to being a narcotics or SWAT, and I'm gonna go for this thing." And they're sending me out when? I mean, like, how much time in between did you have before they're like, "Hey, we need you in Iraq"?
quite a bit. So I came back. Yeah, actually, sorry, I was jumping ahead. So yeah, so I came back, and you know, my wife's like, "How'd it go?" And I said, "Well, I think it went okay. You know, do you have a job?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just waiting for a deployment time." And so there was a little bit of paperwork mix up. So all the guys in my class went before me. They went a few months before me. And I got all my paperwork, and they were cleared hot, and they said, "Okay, it's time to go. Your deployment date is this date." So I told the police department, "Hey, I'm going to work till this date, and then I'm going to take, you know, 5 days, and then I'm going to deploy," because I didn't want my family to lose pay. And I was just, I don't know, I was kind of in a famine mentality because like my wife grew up pretty poor. I had been poor, and I didn't want my kids to be poor. We work really hard for our kids to have opportunities and stuff, and I just didn't want them to feel poor because me and my wife had talked a lot, and we were like, "Oh no, we felt poor at times. Like we felt it. We just, and every parent doesn't want that for, you know, they want better for their kids." It was interesting because when I left the police department, I was like, "Dude, I've been here for 8 years. Like I thought I was a good cop. I was friends with everybody. Like all right, so let's have a party, man. Send me off." Nope, nothing at all. Like it was like, "Oh, hey man, see you later." I'll never forget this. The command staff at the time was pretty rough, except for the chief. The chief he was a hammer, man. He was awesome. Um, Rodney Head, he was awesome. But you know, the other command staff was a little light. I mean, we had a few occasions where like, you know, there was officer safety stuff that I was worried about when I was in NARC because of undercover work. And they're like, "Oh, you're fine. We've all had contracts out on our heads. You're not doing work unless people are looking for you." Oh, great. my family's at home. You know what I mean? Like, anyways, had some really weird kind of animosity run-ins with them. And those guys, I feel, were kind of like envious. Like, wait a minute, like this guy gets to go do all this cool stuff. Like, well, fine, leave, forget this guy. That was the vibe I got from a lot of people. Like, I'm abandoning them, which I understand that dynamic now. I'm not upset about how that worked out, but I'm not gonna lie, it was rough. And the only people that were happy for me were some guys on the team were like, dude, we're excited for you, like it's awesome. And then Nick was like, dude, this is what you're supposed to do, man. Like, so all my mentors and friends were supportive and made me feel good, but our op tempo was so high that there was no party, there was no nothing, because it's just work. And that's what everybody forgets in law enforcement is like, hey man, like when you leave the department, nothing changes. Nothing. And all the time you spend away from your family for that place, you're taking away from people that actually need you there and care about you and do care and would throw you a party, you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Value where you're at. So like it was a really weird awakening. And I remember I was walking out of the locker room, and one of the lieutenants goes, "Oh, hey," and everybody used to call me Goot. They were like, "Hey, Goot, hey, we have this for you." And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And he goes, "Oh, it's your ANOA award for Unit of the Year." And I was like, "Oh, thanks." And he goes, "Hey, best of luck to you, man. See you later." And I'm like,
Mm.
"Okay." And I opened it up, and it had my name, and my name was misspelled. I had two L's in my name, and Roland. And I was like, "I've worked here for 8 years. And
Mm-hmm.
you guys misspell my name on my last day, man." And it was sobering that, like, yeah, I'm doing work, but I really don't matter in this organization. And I sacrificed my family's time, effort to my family. My family has, sacrificed a lot of the things that I should be doing for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay. So
Well, and some of the things that you've brought up as far as just law enforcement and the police organization is some of the, I don't know if it's the stigma or if this has just kind of evolved and been something that's been set over the years. But when you bring up these moments of like working these grueling hours, eating bad food. Oh, well, I'm a police officer. So you naturally just gain a little bit of weight. Or how you go in and you have this initial training where you're hitting a mile and a half in 14 minutes and stuff. Do you think some of these things that are as far as like the initial training coming in, do you think that needs to be a little bit harder? Do you think some of the keeping up with and actually caring about these employees' health and wellness and their continued training and actually showing value, do you feel like that's a problem nationwide, or is it unit by unit? I mean, does it depend on just where you're at, or is that something that you feel is maybe something that has been an issue for the police force?
I think it's an ecological thing. You know, it's something that you couldn't control. And at one point you end up, how are we here? You release, you know, a certain type of invasive species into an ecosystem to take care of a bug management problem. And then it turns out to affect everything else way worse than better. I, I think that's kind of what law enforcement has turned into. And I mean, I got a pretty, pretty strong opinion on this. Um, I have worked with some of the best people that I've ever met in my life that are cops, that I 100% believe if they were not on this earth, that this place would be a worse place. And I believe that those people do these things selflessly and lose pieces of themselves for the greater good of their community, and they will never get the recognition that they deserve. And that's putting it lightly.
Mhm.
And I think that when people think of being a cop, you're just enforcing the law. You're a civil servant, and that's the end of what your involvement is with the public. And it's not. It's such a complex job. It's such a catch-all because the people that work the job do so many things. They get really good at multitasking and being good on so many levels, and also communication, that they end up being tasked with more and more and more and more of diverse things. That's why guys that leave law enforcement usually are extremely successful. And the reason is because they've learned to juggle chainsaws and handle the emotional baggage that comes with it and have a separation. And some people it eats alive. administrations, people that seek to go to elevate to administrations, they align their priorities, incorrectly. They drink the Kool-Aid and believe that you have to live by a metric, and we need to minimize liability here and do this here and do that here and do this here. And they try to treat law enforcement like a corporation. It's not. It's a completely different organization. The organization is in prevention, mitigation, and life saving. And that it's really hard to quantify into numbers. And as the world gets more transactional, right? Like, you got to show me in numbers that your value. Hey, in essence, numbers are fake. When you meet a good person, you're like, that's a good person. Tell me why. Tell me in numbers why. You can't. And numbers don't explain why somebody's a good person that needs to be here doing this. But because everything's so metric based, everything's so numbers based, we have to have an infograph. You get these guys that leave, either they were too afraid to be on the beat in harm's way and they fast tracked to administration, or they got in trouble too much and they fast tracked to administration, or they want to be in power. They want power is what they want. They want to be able to tell somebody what to do. They fast track to administration. Very few people end up in administration that were war horses, that were in the trenches, and then they escalated to leadership that way. Very, very few. And the ones that do are the best at it. They're the best. And it's just leadership, right? Intense situations will pull the right leaders out of the ranks. You don't choose them. The conflict chooses the leader, right? So law enforcement's lost that. And
part of the issue is just we get too hyper focused on checking the boxes. It's like people are coming in, as they check the box, we're going to keep them, sending them through whatever system or they are going through or whatever they fit into. We push them through this, give them as much tasks as we can, and not really get to know.
And they bank off of your buy-in to your job. Your job's cool, so you live your job. Your job is your life. But if your job is your life, a bad day for cops nationwide is a bad day for you. That would be like saying, how do you feel? Podcasters are now being, talked bad about because of XYZ and they call it fake news. How are you going to feel? You're going to be like, that's a dumb opinion, but whatever, because they're talking about one podcaster over here, right? They're not talking about me. But if somebody says, hey, F the police. Whoa, I'm the police. You're not the police. You're a cop. That's your job, but you check out. That's not who you are, right? So, law enforcement banks on that, I think, indirectly, because that's how they keep their attention. They make you feel that this is the most secure thing that you can do in your life, and you're doing something great, and you are. But what they really need to do is take care of their people. And real leadership, you take your budget and you go into the red and you back the people, because it is hard to be good at leadership. It's really hard. It's incredibly hard. And people that say, oh, I'm a good leader. And I don't know any good leaders that say they're good leaders. It's like parents. If you say, no, I'm a good parent, you're probably not. All good parents go, dude, I'm screwing my kids up. Oh man, I messed up. I did this, I did that. And the fact that you care that much, you're probably doing the right thing and you're probably a decent kids. I think that law enforcement needs to focus more on training and hiring practices and focusing on leadership development. So if they hire people, I think that they should extend, kind of like the way that the Netherlands does a really good job. You go to the academy, and this happens too in Japan and other countries, where you go to the academy, and I mean, you do 19 weeks in the academy, and then, okay, all right, now it's field training, and then you're good to go, right? It's a terrible idea. They go back to the academy every month for a year. So they do a month on the road, they do 2 weeks back at the academy, a month on the road, 2 weeks back at the academy. It's a process that really is expensive, but you're investing in somebody that's going to save someone's life. You're investing in someone that's going to have a conversation with a kid that's in crisis, and he's at a turning point, and he may turn into the worst criminal that you may ever have to deal with, or he might end up a priest, or he might end up a special forces operator. He might end up a doctor, right? Your interaction may be that one thing that clicks. People can argue that because that's all conjecture, but in reality, you have key moments in your life, these core memories, like that one movie. What's that movie with all the feelings, right? The Pixar movie. You have these core memories, right? If you lose some core memories, you lose your grounding to how you function. I mean, that movie's, I mean, basically psychology 101, right? Which is pretty awesome. But people don't realize that you are the other piece of someone else's core memory. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to hire a law enforcement guy that wants to check a box and just be run of the mill, hey man, I show up, I write my tickets, I go home. I'm not saying fire that guy, but you need to invest to encourage that guy. You need to invest to make that person fulfill a higher purpose. Because if someone's in to just check a box, there's other jobs that you can do that and not affect society.
Yeah.
And then again, you don't want these people with Superman complexes out there either. You don't want people out there that are power hungry. You have to put them in check. That's why jiu-jitsu is so awesome, because, you start roughing people up because, you want to feel like a tough dude. Well, guess what? There's a mat marshal that's watching you do that, and they're going to kick the shit out of you the next round to remind you, don't do that. That person's half your size. Don't be a bully. And that's how you keep your culture on the mat healthy, right? That's how you keep the biome good. There's no mechanism for that in law enforcement, because there's no, I mean,
and I think of just, I think a lot of these professions that a main purpose behind them is service. So I think of firefighters, I think police, I think people that are in the medical field. And that's something that, I work in the medical field right now. And that's something that always blows my mind, is the system right now where it's been years and decades where it's the norm to, as you're going through the med school, to be able to manage these 12-hour shifts or be able to withstand these days long of service while you're documenting appropriately, handing out the appropriate medications, giving appropriate patient care, working with the rest of your medical providers. And it's just truly unrealistic. And everybody's so quick to judge the service that is being given and if these people are doing the best in these roles. But I think sometimes we're taking a step back and making sure that we are doing the best for our service members so they can be giving the best that they can, as far as it be mentally, physically, all around, and I think it just is like that 360. And I think sometimes we get so busy looking at a quarter of it or only half of it, where we're not really. And I would assume some of these big corporations, and hopefully we got to stay optimistic that these systems are getting better. But it is wild to me that there's just has been decades long of this kind of bad habits of not really providing the training and the skill set and the culture and the support for these professionals to be the best service providers that they can. And hopefully a lot of these people are starting what they're doing, whether it be in the medical field or in the police forces, to help and to serve. And I think that gets kind of quickly thrown out the window once all the other issues fall into play, of just simply no sleep, poor nutrition, not getting any validation for the hard work and the crazy stuff that these individuals are doing. And so I was just interested to hear your opinion on it, and because it sounds like you were kind of in the trenches of all of that. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's just interesting.
Yeah, same. And I don't think so. I don't think I have the answers, but I think the cause is profit. It's all profit. And I hate to say, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, eat the rich, blah, blah, blah. Right. I mean, dude, people got to make money. Billionaires make the world go round. That's the honest to God truth. Most of us wouldn't have jobs if the billionaires didn't create that marketplace, right? So it's all an ecosystem, but it's the middle. I don't think it's the top people. And I've seen organizations that are very deep. It's not the top. It's not the billionaires. It's the budding millionaires that should not be there. And that's the wild thing, is if you're a billionaire, would you ruin hundreds of thousands of lives to make 500 million? No, even if you're an evil one, no, right? But if you're an executive who wants to maximize profits to look better to those billionaires, and you're willing to scratch claw, do whatever you want to do, and your net worth is, a few million, what does 500 million mean to you? That's a big rung on that ladder. That's affecting hundreds of that's affecting the world, is people with poor morality at that level, which is wild, right? Like, not the chief of police but the sergeants. You get a bad sergeant, whoo, man, you end up making a movie about how bad they are. Like, that's newsworthy. So, it's behoove of the people of the upper levels, for the CEOs to really manage who's driving their companies. Same thing with municipalities, your city managers and your or your county executives, and to really understand who are driving all of your wins and losses. How do you consider your expectations? What are your KPIs? If they're driving your KPIs, make sure that it's not just money. So that way the city makes more money, the county makes more money, the this and that, because they're gonna throw all that money away anyways and misuse it. But where does it equate? It equates to the first responder, which I put everybody in the medical industry that way. If you're face first to crisis, and you're making the lowest amount acceptable, um, you know, to keep the city in the black, to handle somebody's crisis, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make sense at all, right? But I think that's how the system's geared, and I don't think the system will change until technology catches up and companies don't do well because people, use their monetary power to, I'm not buying what you're selling. I'm not living where you guys are, So
you put in your time, you finished up there, and then at this point, you knew where you were going to be deployed. You were going to Iraq first? Okay.
To Iraq. We went to Camp Shield, where we lost our principal. Well, we didn't lose our principal, but the other team lost their principal, and we didn't end up getting the principal, so they disbanded our team. So then I went to the embassy, and then since I was a firearms instructor, I went on the range, and we ran qualifications and training for all the Americans over there. We trained a few of the Iraqi police units once in a blue moon. But all the guys I was working with most of them were former Blackwater guys, because after Nisour Square, the governments and, there's a lot of cross back and forth. Everybody threw their hands up, got upset. And what they did is they basically, Triple Canopy was in Afghanistan and Blackwater was in Iraq. And they just basically swapped task orders to make the governments happy. The people all stayed, and they were the same people. They just changed hats. And, there was a lot going on contractor wise in Iraq that got really bad press, and it was just bad reporting. I mean, I can't really speak to it because I wasn't there, but I've met guys and roomed with guys that, I mean, these dudes were heroes, what they went through. And, the media painted them very wrong. It's one of those things where you see all this happen and you go, wow, like these are really good people. And, how do these companies get bad names? And you hear reporters calling contractors mercenaries, and it's like, oh, get out of here, man. Stop that. We're working for the American government. Like we're under a microscope more than some of the military guys that are over there. So I had such crap. And I'm sure that there were some incidents that I wasn't aware of, and a lot of details I'm not aware of because I wasn't there. But every contractor that I worked with were stellar people. These were guys that I was really, really honored to work with some of them. They were great. There were some weirdos. I mean, there were a handful of like, whoa, wait, what are you doing here? But it's anywhere. But a vast majority of them, I mean, I feel lucky to have shared any time with them whatsoever. Like they absolutely added to my life 100%. And
so what did your days look like when you were in Iraq then? So you got switched and you were helping on the shooting range. What did that time frame look like? Because how long were you over there?
I was over there for about a year.
Wow.
Yeah. So I started on Camp Shield, and then I started a rotation, and then that rotation got interrupted, and then I ended up jumping on a different rotation cycle, which put me on the range. So I had to start a new rotation. So it was almost, I mean, it was probably 10 months actually, something like that, almost a year, and sold some time back because I needed to make money for the family, and I was making significantly more money. So my day in to day out I was at the embassy. I'd wake up pretty early, go to breakfast with all the guys on the range, and we were all the red shirts, so we got to wear shorts. So we had our armor, our kit, and shorts, and because we were on the range the whole time, and we would move from the embassy to the range, which wasn't far away, and we had a bunch of just logistical tasks to get all the ammo and all this stuff. And we'd have huge lines of guys come in, and whole teams would come in. We'd train the whole team up, get the net, and run through about 3 teams a day, 4 teams a day. And then do some training with pistol, rifle, shotgun, and belt feds, M240 M240 Bravo and the 249 Parasaw, and that's mainly what we dealt with in Baghdad. We eat lunch out there, and we'd make it back for dinner, and then everybody usually work out, and then I would do jiu-jitsu club at the embassy. So there was Department of State folks that would show up, and sometimes I'd go to jiu-jitsu club, and then there was across from the embassy, there was a place called Camp Prosperity, and it was an old palace that we had sent a J-dam through the top of the palace. There's a big old hole in the ceiling, and that's where the gym there. They had a big, giant, nice gym, and so there was a gym over there, and then you could go up all these stairs into this weird upper level. And it was kind of a low ceiling and upper level. And that's where you could see the hole where the J-dam came in. And there was wrestling mats up there, old, stinky, probably ringworm infested wrestling mats. And there was a handful of jiu-jitsu guys that were good that went there. So
was this already up and running when you got there? And somebody was like, hey, you got to just check this out. And then
I just heard it passing. Yeah, I was like, anybody have a jiu-jitsu club? And anybody? And they're like, no, man. There used to be one at the embassy, but I mean, you got to talk to the people over there. So I talked to them, and then I restarted it again, and some purple belt with it. And then I was a blue belt at the time. And then they were like, yeah, there's some Brazilian guy that goes up there with a small group in Camp Prosperity. So I'd have to like check out of the embassy, do all that stuff, walk across the street, and, and you're in the green zone. I mean, we would take a little bit of like small arms fire or incoming once in the blue moon. And it wasn't relatively close to us, but every now and then there would be, So the threat level wasn't there when I was there. I mean, I'm sure there was more threat that I didn't know about, but I was just kind of like doing my thing. So I walked across the street, checked into that base, and I just had my cat card, my Glock in my pants, and workout clothes. And somebody had told me how to get there. I walk into this palace and I see the gym, and they're like, hey, is there a mat room anywhere? And somebody's like, no. Oh yeah, it's up these stairs. And it looked like a weird construction, plywood, random thing. I'm like, God, this is so weird. So I just started going up there, and the next thing, there's like 2 hanging lights. It's all creepy looking, and there's some sweaty Brazilian dude in there who's an army guy who's literally getting his citizenship because he's in the military. And I was like, hey. And he's like, hey, we doing jiu-jitsu? And he's like, okay. So we just started training there some days. Some days he was up there, some days he wasn't. Some days
How many guys were going at this time?
Group, probably 2 or 3 in that small group. Yeah. And then at the embassy, we had like a solid 4 or 5 guys. And there was a lot of head shed Department of State guys that were like, hey, I want to learn jiu-jitsu. And I think they probably assumed that I was way more high speed than I was as far as my job. I'm like, I'm just a range guy, but I'm here training. So I'm like, yeah, I'll have my wife send gis and we'll just start doing jiu-jitsu. So we started a club. And there was always clubs at the embassy. It was just, I had a section of time that I had a jiu-jitsu club in there. They had nice mats and everything, super clean. But the other spot across the street was fun. And that dude, when he was in on rotation, we trained a ton. Cool dude, but it was all no gi on that side. Gi was on the other side. So it was kind of cool. It was a good experience. I mean, it was really cool. I mean, there was one time we were training, and there was one guy, and he swam a lot. So the pool was was in the same building, and a rocket hit the front of the building, and he was swimming in nothing happened because they're all hard buildings. But the false ceiling in the pool room fell into the pool, and he comes walking out, and he's like, I can't even have a swim without getting interrupted. And he's covered in all this white stuff. He's like, that's stupid. Nobody cared about the rocket that hit the thing. It was a little BS rocket, but it was just so funny because we were so oblivious to, like, because you lived in this little bubble.
Sure.
You were just so oblivious that like there was.
You got in your normal day-to-day routine.
Yeah. So then time passed, and I made a lot of friends over there. And there were like big personalities, like a lot of people. Everyone was a gym rat because otherwise you'd go insane. And you just met really good people over there. They were just good people for the reason of being a good person. And it was nice. And then when I came home, Sophia was about to be born, my third. So I got home a few days before she was born, and then Obama gave the country back, and I couldn't go back to Iraq. They wouldn't accept visas. So we went from, like, I cashed out my retirement. I was making a ton of money. Life was good. Jonna was like, man, life's great. And then I'm home for 30 days straight in I don't have anything to do, but we just enjoy ourselves. We were working on the house, put a bunch of money in our house. And then I couldn't get back into Iraq. And then I was like, oh no. And I was going to jiu-jitsu every day. Rick was like, hey man, you haven't lost any time. And I'm like, I'm training every day. So, I'm training, keeping my head straight. And then I couldn't get back in the country for 7 months. And we started getting really lean. And we were behind payments on everything. And it got all the way to the point where we were parking our car in the garage so it wouldn't get taken, like it would get repossessed. We had a foreclosure notice and an auction notice on our door. We were going to auction our house off. Like, we were just like, oh my God. Like, I mean, things turned really fast because all the money we got, we invested right back into our house to like get our house. And
Right.
I'm like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this for years. Right. And then
Yeah.
I see that coming. So, we were just taking a breath of like, oh, this is nice. Well, boom, right back to bad stuff. And then we're living off borrowed money. And I remember a guy that I got my black belt with, Mike, his family, like the Lowenthal's are just such wonderful people. They wrote us a check and we're like, here. And we're like, dude, we can't. They're like, we know you're going through a hard time. Pay us back when you can. And we literally made that stretch for, it was crazy. I mean, we were literally like living off of top ramen and like bean and cheese burritos. Like and my kids didn't know the difference. They went from having anything they wanted to us being so poor about to lose everything. And I just have to get on a contract, and I couldn't get a different job in between because I would have to change my clearance. I'd have to add it and they'd have to redo my clearance. So I'm in this limbo phase of like, don't worry, we'll get your visa in 2 weeks, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. And so Jonna went back to work and was working her butt off. And she was, she just had Sophia and had a C-section, a really bad C-section, where she had a bunch of complications and it was a bad situation.
Yeah.
And I got invited to go work for Academy, which Blackwater turned into Academy. So I went to Moyoc, they called me out, they accepted me in, and they said, yeah, we're going to send you to this place called Herat. And here I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a big machine, just like I was in before, like just a cog in a machine. And it was a short period of time. I was only there for, 10 months or so. And so I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, all right, I'll go to another vetting. So I went to the vetting and, I'd gotten a little heavier because I couldn't afford to go to jiu-jitsu. And I told Rick, I can't do this for free. And he's like, dude, don't worry about it. You can get me back later. I'm like, so instead of going 5 days a week, I go 1 day a week. And it made me feel better, but it really made me feel worse. And Rick's like, dude, just show up, man. Just show up. And it was, I was eating my stress and, I'd go rucking in the desert just to kind of take the stress off. Cause I thought, man, cause I can't go back to the police department. Well, I didn't ask because I was like, I'm not going back. And everybody was kind of hoping I would fail. Like a lot of them, they were like, oh, you left the police department. You just thought you were cool. Well, guess you're not that cool, So like, it was kind of a weird situation. And then I got picked up with Academy, and then we were literally on our last $300 to our names, and they were going to auction the house off later in the month. I mean, all kinds of wild stuff. And so I do my run in my vetting. They're like, okay, let's do your PT. And I've never been a good runner. And we run, and I run it flat out as hard as I can. And I run like, I don't know, like a 12-minute mile and a half. And they were like, ooh, yeah. So you actually missed it by 9 seconds. And I went, what does that mean? And they go, well, you did everything. You maxed out the bench press. You maxed out this. You maxed out everything else. You did great and everything else. And if you would have missed this by 15 seconds, we would have sent you home. But you only missed it by 9, so you can run it tomorrow. And I was like, and they go, just try harder. And I'm like, let me tell you, I was like flat out. And I'm like, oh no. And I just instantly, I was like, where's that one guy? And there was this one guy who's a rabbit, man. He's a ranger, showed up in skinny jeans and just, little dude. And he was power to weight ratio, perfect, really nice guy. And, he was the fastest guy. He ran the mile and a half, I think, it was a sub 9-minute mile and a half, and he ran it barefoot. And, I said, hey dude, you need to teach me how to run tonight. And he goes, okay, take your shoes off. And we walked out in front of the hotel, and that's when everything started, because I was so like, everyone, they weren't eating with everyone else because they would feed us, but if we didn't want to, we wanted to go out to lunch, we could go out to lunch, because it was a little more gentleman style, because it wasn't a full train up. It was an abbreviated train up of like 3 weeks to a month or something like that. And I was like, okay, well, I don't have the money to eat out. So I was just eating the free fruit and coffee at the hotel. And let me tell you, if all you're eating is coffee and fruit, yeah, like don't sneeze. Yeah, right. So I'm like, man, so I mean, that's literally what I'm functioning on. And I didn't want to mess up everybody else's meals, so I just go with them. And they're like, "You hungry?" I'm like, "I'm solid, man." I grabbed a coffee at the thing before I left. And, and John is calling me like, "Hey, is everything, like, how's it going?" Because then I said, "Well, how's everything going at home?" And she's like, "Oh, things are fine," but things were not fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was super stressful. And then this dude took me outside and said, "Okay, dude, take shoes off." Okay. He's like, "You're running and you're heel striking. You need midfoot strike." And he explained midfoot strike and da 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 and all that stuff. And I was like, and my eyes were open, my ears were open, and I was just sucking in every bit of information he had. And he goes, "So you just lean forward and catch yourself with your foot and then push down while your foot is under your butt, and then it'll propel you forward. And the foot strike count is the same as you're sprinting. It's just shorter. So if you want to go faster, lean forward. That's it. Take time. Don't sprint," because I could sprint, but I didn't know how to run. And so we ran like 2 miles barefoot and worked on it. And then the next day I went out there sore, and then I ran like an 11 flat. So I shaved a minute off my time. And I felt like I had more in the tank. I was like, I can't believe that worked. And then that was kind of a click. Like, your cardio's in your technique. Your cardio, everything's in the technique. Just think you're smarter than the technique.
Like the fundamentals.
Yeah. And so, you can't just will everything to happen. Like, can't just hold your breath and then move a mountain. That's fantasy. And so, yeah, it was super humbling. And it was funny because I knew that my family's life and lifestyle hung in the balance. So I told my wife, "Okay, I passed." And she was like, "Oh my God, okay." I can breathe. And I said, "It's not over yet." She goes, "Okay. All right." So I went through that training, and then we were better. And then I got deployed, and I expected, okay, I'm going to fly into this major airport with all these other contractors. And I make it to Herat, Afghanistan, which is about 30 minutes away from the Iranian border. And was relatively mellow when I got there. It got worse as I stayed there, but I fly in, and it's 2 days of flying. I fly through Kabul, and I land in Herat, and I land at dusk. It's still, the sun's going down. I'm the only American on the flight. I'm all by myself. And I'm like, oh man, this is so different from my other experience. And no one speaks English. Airports ran all by ANA, and there's just no Americans or no military around at all. I'm just flying into this weird ass place, and I have a backpack. And that's it. And I'm like, oh man, and everyone's looking at me funny. They're all on cell phones and looking at me funny, and your mind's just spinning, right? And I'm like, here we go. And I walk outside, and they're like shutting down the airport. They're closing the airport because it closes down at night because there's only 4 flights. And I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm looking around for the Americans. I'm like, wow. I'm waiting to see like a Suburban or an armored Land Cruiser or something, right? Anything. And then pulls this beat up vehicle, right? And this dude opens the door and goes, "Hey dude, get in." And I went, "No." And he, and it was Jerry Tyrell. He was a former SEAL, old guy, legend. And he goes, "No, bro, get in the car. Get in the car." And then all of a sudden, and I couldn't see in the windows because it was dark. And then the back door opens, and I see other Americans. They're like, "Dude, you get in the car or what?" And I was like, "Oh shit, okay, yeah, I'll get in." And I was like, this is crazy. And then they set a saw right in between us, right? Like a small machine gun. And they go, "Okay, you're on the saw if anything goes bad." I said, "All right." And they go, "Okay, welcome to Herat." And then we take off, and I'm like, this is crazy. And we're driving through Herat, and it's a long way. It's not like we're in Iraq where everything's so close and you're in this big city and there's so much military infrastructure. It's not like that. It wasn't like that at all. And then we lived in this villa compound about a mile away from the consulate. Like my window, when I opened my window, I was probably 25 feet from the wall and about another 30 feet from the busiest bus station in Afghanistan. They could see me, I could see them. And I was like, well, at least I'm so close. If they shot an RPG in, it wouldn't have time to arm and it would just punch into something and it would stick. So I'd be okay, right? It was so wild. It was so different. And everybody, it was cool because you watched what people did to kind of mitigate their stress level, because like there was significantly a threat. And, in 2013, we were attacked almost exactly 1 year to the day, almost a couple days off from Benghazi. The same Haqqani network attacked our consulate. And, we saw the things building to that. And I remember eating, it eating breakfast or lunch, watching our Benghazi unfold on TV on AFN, and all of us looked at each other and we're like, "Ah, dude, we're next. We know we're next. We know just the situation." Because we had a lot of agency presence at our consulate, and a lot of aid. And at the time, I didn't know really, like, what are we doing there? Um, and they had all kinds of interests over there. So, and it being so close to the Iranian border, I mean, we'd be outside working out, and you look up and there's a drone, and they're like, "That's not ours."
Mm.
Okay. It was just weird.
So what was your day-to-day there? What was your responsibility when you were over there?
So when I went over there, I was like a backup movement team guy. We had teams that were with the AMBO. We had teams that were like with our main principals. We had advanced teams. So I would help out sometimes on the advanced teams. I would fill a position, and then personnel pickups and small details, nighttime details, that they would have small groups go that they would put me on. And usually they would use headquarters guys for that. So I kind of fell into like a headquarters role because I was a firearms instructor. And so being the lead firearms instructor there, they leaned on us because they were like, "Yo, you have good hard skills." And then our camp got a little bigger. So we had a training manager, and the training manager had me all cross certified in all kinds of training. So like basically everything from defensive tactics to emergency response team training to QRF training to driving class, the class 1 vehicles, like all these different trainings. And it was just so much so fast that it was kind of hard to comprehend. But I was just part of the training cadre. I'm not a box checker. Now, people liked training with me because like I just wanted to see them get better. I just would help them see improvement. I didn't focus on like, "Okay, perfect. So you're now operating at this standard, and and now we can move on to this next module." I have a hard time with that, and I think people have a hard time with that. I think it creates a transactional mindset, and so but
Mhm.
that's the world, right? So because I was doing that, my day to day, I was in work mode. I was like a Malinois man. Like I was always looking for work, because when I first got to that site, I was called what was called a gray man, which they wanted my skill sets, they wanted all my stuff, but they didn't have a billet for me yet officially. So to pay me, they would have me do something that a TCN would do, which is a third country national, which is like we would hire special forces from El Salvador, Colombia, Peru, and they were great dudes, great dudes. But we would have them do certain tasks, like site security tasks. So if they wanted to plus up more American like talent to fill positions that were going to be coming open, they would pull you in as a gray man's, and you would do a TCN job for a couple months until your job popped up. That way they always had a backfill. It was really smart to do. So when I got in there, I remember sitting and I'm like, "Hey, what do you want me to do, boss? Whatever you need." And they go, "Okay, we want you to sit here and watch this screen, and it's a poll cam. And if anything happens, let us know." And I said, "For how long?" And they said, for 8 hours. And I went, "Okay." And the fatigue, right?
Oh
And
my gosh, I can't
it's
imagine.
crazy. And I had no comms. I just had a radio. It wasn't like I ran a dispatch. It was just a separate job that we had at TCN do. We had all these different things that TCNs did that we had to have by requirement, but some of it was stupid. So they just put us there and waited. And I'm like, "Hey, well, once the range guy leaves, he's out, he's done." I slid into a spot, and I figured I could just go train with that guy and then figure out how the ranges ran, so I don't have to, have a better trainer. And they were like, "No." And one of the guys that was running that, he was kind of old school. And after about 5 days, I was like, "Hey, do you happen to know like when the range guy's there? I'd like to meet him, and because that's going to be my job later. I was just wondering if there's like a projected time date, I could just prepare better for that job." And he goes, "You don't like the shit, go home." And I went, "Oh no, 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 that's not what I'm saying at all. That's not what I'm saying." And he goes, "No, no, you don't like it, go home." And I was like, no, I think we totally got off on the wrong spot, on the wrong foot here. And I was like, dude, I just got, like, in my mind, I'm like, I just got my bills back up. I just got everything situated. My family's finally able to take a breath and we're not going to get kicked out of our house. I was like, oh my God, I can't leave here. I can't fail at this. Right. Like I said, no problem. I'll watch my screen. And I sat there and I did it for about almost a month, like 3 weeks. And then the range came up and then I went to the range and
Did anything come up within that month where you're like,
absolutely nothing. Nothing. That could have been a painting on the wall.
Ooh.
Could have been painting. Yeah. Like, so it
Which
was.
is probably not good when things do come up on there.
No,
but
because it was a terrible idea, but needless to say, it was what it was. And then my day to day was I went to the range. And so I'd wake up early in the morning and we had this clandestine range called the Talon Range that was two Connex boxes, two 20-foot Connex boxes with cement tubes that connected them, 4 of them. And you shot down the tubes. They were all lit and they had a positive pressure. So it was all inside of that. So we didn't have to leave too often to qualify for our small arms. And it was supposed to be like a clandestine range, something secret you could have in town. It was still loud, but it was so muffled. Most people didn't know what it was. It just sounded industrial. And I sat in there and shot machine guns and qualified everybody on all their weapon systems every morning from like 6 to noon. And then after that, I'd work out, eat, and then I'd do my paperwork. And I would usually have a run at night where we would go pick up a guy that's flying in, because we had to do that a lot because we flew in onesies, twosies instead of big shifts of people because we didn't have that big of a base. Or we'd cover for somebody go to the governor's mansion. They needed somebody to go at night to fill in on the team because that team was going to be back up early in the morning. So they didn't want to wear out the team or increase threat level. And they needed a QRF to spin up. So it was, it was
random odd jobs.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Very, very random odd job for me, but I was always busy.
Yeah.
And everyone was busy. Nobody has an easy day here.
Sure.
But we were just always so busy and we're always working out and everyone that thrived in that space, we were all eccentric. So I just really like coffee. Man, coffee was like home to me, right? So like I had more exotic coffee offerings than probably a super bougie coffee shop in Seattle. Like, I mean, I had Hawaiian coffees walked from the reserves they were grown on by a Hawaiian to my room in Afghanistan. I had Ethiopian Yurichafe walked from the region of Kaffa to my room by an Ethiopian. No bullshit. This is real. Like it was a Colombian. I had probably like 8 pounds of Colombian coffee walked to my room. My coffee was amazing. My coffee game was on point. And then I had all these different apparatuses.
What a dream.
Oh yeah. So it was super cool. And then in my room, it was kind of, I'd set up, I'd have my computer and then I had my bed, which was elevated up. So I could slide a big box underneath it that had machine guns and all my stuff that I could pack up and leave when I left on my rotation out. And then I had my little coffee set up over my little mini fridge and guys would come to my room all the time and I'd stop whatever I was doing to make them coffee because it was just a moment to not be there. You know what I mean? I had a big old giant French press and in the morning everybody go up to the roof, all my buddies, we go up and we'd have a French press while the sun was coming up. And, it was funny because we're sitting on this, you're sitting on this roof and you look out and Herat's an ancient city. Alexander the Great built a citadel there. So I could see the citadel from my building. So you see the ancient city and the minarets, which are 4 spires that are up. They look like exhaust pipes. And so you see all this and you see everyone moving around like ants functioning and doing their thing. And you're sitting up there and it's so quiet. And then, prayer would go off, morning prayer. And we'd be drinking coffee, some just really good exotic coffee. And then just to the side of us, on the roof, you got some big jacked tattooed monster doing yoga, trying to get with his inner zen, and you're just like, this is the craziest.
Yeah.
Weirdest normal I could imagine, but it just was what it was, right? And so like I watched all these guys, everyone was on like a self-improvement cycle. So like I was always trying to improve something spiritually, educationally, I mean, you name it, right? And I talked to my wife a lot during that time and my kids during that time. And then that was kind of like my day to day. And then and when things got worse, started getting dicey, I started missing a lot of it. I started missing, like, it was a weird thing when the attack happened. I was kind of like an old salt already. on the base. Like I was like one of the guys, which was cool because I didn't really consider myself one of the guys because most of the guys, they worked their mission and then they're off. I had so many jobs that I was never off. I was always working. Most guys are walking around in their little Ranger panties and, little short shorts and tank tops and flip flops most of the day. And I was always working. And then at the end of the night, after our runs, we would do jiu-jitsu either on the roof of the consulate or in the dungeon, which was like a big rock room. And we had probably 15 people doing jiu-jitsu all the time. So that was my day to day. That was my op tempo, just work, 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 work. And when I assumed if something bad was going to happen, I'd be there. Like I'd be a part of it. And I missed everything by a day or hours. It was so wild. And I kind of felt some like guilt. Like, dude, I should have been there. You know what I mean? Because bad things happen, but our guys handled it, man. Our guys were rock stars. When we got attacked on the 13th, we didn't lose any Americans. We didn't lose any TCNs either. We lost 4 interpreters that were local, which was sad. They were good dudes, but they were in the blast area. So basically the Connie network set up this complex attack where they had a V-big pull up. They shot one of our guys. They shot one of our TCNs through the arm, and he fell, and the blast went over top of him, and it buckled the fence, the ECP, to get into the consulate. And we're a mile down the road from the consulate, but we had an ERT there, and they didn't think we did. And so they were going to blow the fence. And then these 12 dudes had another car, and they were going to pull up and go through, and they had shaped charges, and, they had the headbands and the whole bit. It's like a bad movie. And they were going to go in and kidnap all the personnel and take them all out. And our team was there, and those guys were rock stars. They got into firefights and killed all of them. And in epic fashion, right? Those guys they were fearless, accurate, and
did their job.
Yeah. And with integrity. There was no extra. There was no, we're just going to lay waste. These guys were surgical, and they were good. They were professionals.
Mm-hmm. And so you were still over there at this time. You were just at a different location.
Oh, so I left September 11th. Like they're like, you fly home September 11th. And I went, that's a rough day to fly. Mm. Okay, whatever. So I left camp at September 11th. By the time I got into the States, I was, I had just done a training with the ERT, just done a training with them. And I landed, and the first thing that was normal, we had moved to Camas, Washington at that time. And I get on the mat, and one of my buddies texts me, and I'm rolling, right? My phone's blowing up, and I go, hey, hold on, man, I gotta check my phone. I literally landed. My wife drove me straight to the gym, and I checked my phone, and they're like, hey, dude, I think your work got hit. And so one of my friends told me, and I said, nah, man, it was probably Kabul. I said, Kabul's had a few incidences. It's probably not us. We're mellow, man. And he sent me the article, and I went, oh my God. And I saw it as it's unraveling, and I went, oh, I just had a pit in my stomach. And I'm like, man, I wasn't worried, because I'm like, those guys are the baddest dudes on the planet, man. Those guys are bad dudes. I'm not worried about them. Like, they can handle anything. I felt bad. Like, I wasn't there with them. Like, oh no, I should be there with them. I should be living through this, right? Like, I don't want anybody to have to carry anything I can't carry. And it was a weird mindset. And I think a lot of people deal with that. Like, a lot of, like, some people call it survivor's guilt, but it's just kind of like, if you've been working and then you take a rest and everyone works around you, you feel guilty for taking a rest, but it's kind of necessary thing. And it just was, I wasn't supposed to be there. So of course they're like, hey, this happened. We were going to cut guys' leaves short. So, we turn around and head back. My wife's totally okay with it. And so I made it back, and I saw everything, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. And hearing all the stories and stuff. And I checked with all the guys. I'm like, hey, are you guys all good? And they're like, we're all up. We're good, but we can't talk because, they have to go comms completely black. So I get back, and they tell me how it unraveled. And I was like, dude, that's awesome. And there was a couple of guys that were on ERT that were like, hey, man, like, because I want you to know, like, I heard you in my ear while I was engaging people. And it was like a Jiminy Cricket. Okay, reload, da-da-da-da-da, gas your gun up, gas it up. And I was, dude, that's awesome. It was awesome because he did something. He had a mental cue that kept him on top of the fight, right? Always. And And I just got to be a part of it, help him. That, like, I felt like, okay, my job isn't totally stupid. Cause for a while I was starting to think, oh dude, my job's kind of unnecessary because these guys are badass. I'm just here to check a box. So they're qualified.
Mm-hmm.
It made me feel like I wasn't wasting my time there, but I was super proud of the guys. Cause like how they handled that whole situation is impressive. And then being on camp afterwards and things were dicey again because I was there for like about 3 years.
So you went back in September, they got attacked. How quick was your turnaround? And when you went back, were you there straight through?
I was there for another 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had another 2 rotations. My dad wasn't doing good, and I knew it was kind of time for me to get back. And one of my buddies, um, that that I worked with over there, he had left, and he went and worked for Microsoft's ERT team, which is like a stationary emergency response team of pretty capable, backgrounded individuals that keep the Microsoft SLT safe. And and it was a good team. It's still a good team. And he was like, hey man, I can get you in over here to have an interview with these guys. And I was like, we just moved to Camas, and we moved to Camas to kind of be closer to their family. And because he lived in Vancouver. And so then as soon as we moved there, they moved to Seattle. So we were like, oh, okay, well, I'll think about it. And then I was talking to my dad. My dad was pretty sick. And he was like, yeah, he's like, I think you should probably think about doing something closer to home. My dad wasn't a stranger to how dangerous sometimes work is. Like, when I was a cop, there was a time where I had to wrestle a gun out of a guy's hand. And I pulled him through a window and busted the window, and he was basically waiting to shoot me when I came back to the window. And it was my parents' house was on this hill, this really drastic hill. And they have a balcony that overlooks all of it, so they could see it. And so my parents, anytime they saw lights, they walked outside and they had a cigarette and coffee and would just hang out on the patio all the time. And they watched that happen. And I was far enough away they didn't know it was me. But I arrested the person in the front seat, came back, and my buddy Brad literally saved my life. He looked down and he saw a holster on the floor, and the guy had the gun underneath his lap and was going to shoot me in the face. And Brad showed up and he goes, whoa, and kind of startled him. And then I came up the other side, pulled him out of the car, and the window was open about that much, and busted the window. We bounced off the ground when the gun goes flying. And my parents would have saw me get shot in the face. And so I came home and it was kind of heavy. And my dad was like, hey, you all right? And I was like, yeah, it's a wild day today. I'm like, here's what happened. And so I told him, and he goes, oh. And he goes, that's what happened down, like, we watched that. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, don't tell your mother. I said, I won't. Like, so he's used to that, right? He's used to stuff like that happening. And he never said, like, I think you should get out of that. No, he was always like, no, be there, go do that. It's dangerous, but I mean, so what, And I think he was proud of that. But he made a weird comment where he was like, hey, he goes, I think it's time for you to come home. I think I'm ready for you to come home. And I was like, oh, he's not doing good.
Yeah, that's when you knew it was serious.
Yeah. And so I took that job and I came home, and
before all this happened, Roland, so you were in Arizona. Did they move to Washington too? Like, what drove you guys to move from Arizona to Washington?
we visited because we were there wasn't a lot of opportunity for our kids. The schools were so the sports weren't very good. Very few kids make it out of the desert. They either go to Vegas or Phoenix, and that was kind of the pinnacle of everything. And I just didn't want that life for my kids. I wanted them to have like a bigger thing to choose from.
Mm-hmm.
And the heat was just, you live in the heat for 15 years. It gets old after a while. I had so many bad memories in Bullhead, like with friends that, aren't around anymore, with, to me, like Bullhead, it was like the devil's playground. I didn't see it as being a prosperous place, and I didn't want to keep my kids close to it.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted my kids to kind of have a little more of a pure upbringing. And we had great friends there, and we had a great support system, and it was all good. It was just, man, that place was heavy. Bad things happened there. They were really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And just devastating bad things. And I wasn't used to that because that wasn't very like normal in my growing up. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
just extreme things that happened out there. But when we visited my buddy, we were like, dude, it's amazing. I've never been in the Pacific Northwest. It's so pretty. And we were just like, as long as we're not cooking in the sun, we'll take the rain every day. And so my kids loved it. They just absolutely took to it.
So did you guys move before you went to Afghanistan?
No, I lived in Afghanistan for the beginning, and in the middle, Jonna moved everything while I was deployed.
Wow. Jonna is just a rock star.
Nobody can do what she can do. She's like hands down. Like when people go, "Oh man, you've done a ton of stuff," I'm like, talk to my wife. my wife has done way more. You know, it's a funny fact.
Amazing to hear the level of teamwork that you guys had through such ups and downs. It's probably just made you guys even stronger as a family and unit.
We've gone through a lot, and let me tell you, she absolutely is. She's my rock. So is absolutely everything, and she's been through more than I have, hands down. So when people think, you know, she's a nice stay-at-home mom, like, no, she runs our business. When I met her, she was not only working, raising 2 kids and doing all this stuff on her own, she was holding down everything that I was having to bring home, all my baggage from being a cop and doing that stuff. And, you know, small towns, you know, you're experiencing the same stuff. Yeah, so she's, you know, just amazing. And I couldn't have done anything without her doing what she did. I had literally nothing. When people ask, what's your superpower? My wife. 100%. 100%. So, yeah.
That's great. And so you finish up in Afghanistan. Your buddy talked to you about the security job. Did you guys then have to decide to move from where you were at to Seattle area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we had to move to Seattle, and then, you know, so we kept our house. We rented it to our friends. We moved to Redmond. And then, you know, I started working for that team. That team was a really high level team. I mean, the talent we had on that team was bananas. It was pretty wild. We had guys that were former contractors, MARSOC guys, UFC fighters. Like, it was wild.
And is this the security team that you still work with today?
No. That was a team that I came up to work with. And then we've all kind of since gone mostly our own ways. But yeah, it was a lot of good folks on that team. That team is a good clearinghouse. Like, a lot of talent has come out of that team and gone to other teams and move up. So there were some really good folks that ran that team in its time, and it's still great people there right now. It's a great team, but you know, corporate security is an interesting thing. It's riddled with NDAs, but those teams are essential for business, you know, like high level business to exist. And it's kind of a weird little shadow alcove because they create the bubble that business, you know, works in. So, you know, when people go, oh, you know, you used to, you know, work at Microsoft, I was like, oh, I was a vendor there. And they go, oh, cool. What? So you must know about this and this and this. And I'm like, I can barely turn my computer on. And they're like, oh, okay. But the level of training that we had there, unreal. The medical training, I mean, the people I got to meet, it was unreal, and pretty social guy. So I made sure that I got to meet everybody, and they're just all such nice, high level, good people. You know what I mean? And it's hard because in the security realm and in thinking about like combatives and firearms and defensive tactics and driving and all this stuff, there's such specialized things that people live in one world all the time, and then you live in all the worlds. It's really interesting. And then all the EP stuff and responsibilities, it kind of compounds into these little niches that, you know, you get to meet a bunch of really cool people, and you can choose to compete with them, or you can choose to like
learn from them.
Them. I've just always been lucky to be around these really high level people and just get the rub. You know, like I still feel like, oh, I'm not supposed to be here. You know, I'm like, I like being the lowest guy on the totem pole in the room. I'm like, okay, I'm not supposed to be here, but I'm glad I made that cut. Seems like the second that I start climbing, I get to another room and I'm back at the bottom, which is good. That's
helps you continue to grow and get better.
Yeah. I mean, and be comfortable with not being
top
not
dog.
Feeling like you're the guy. Yeah. So it helps.
That's a wrap to part 1 of this episode. Catch part 2, where the conversation with Roland continues. Thanks for listening to The Grip. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow along on Instagram at @TheGritPod to stay up to date on new episodes. That way you can send over a DM if you've got a question you'd like to hear answered on our roll call series. Now remember, stay sharp, be grounded, and never lose your grip. See you next time.